There we go. We are now officially live in this live TOEFL Q&A video. As always, I'm going to introduce myself for those of you who do not know me. My name is Mike Marcano. I am a TOEFL tutor. Due to my job, I prepare students for the TOEFL exam. I help them understand the TOEFL test, prepare for the test, improve their performances, and hopefully pass the TOEFL exam. The purpose of this video is to discuss a recent experience that I had with the new TOEFL test, a test that changed this past July. Once again, on July 26th, a new TOEFL started happening. And this test had a couple of changes that I already discussed in previous videos. Hopefully you guys here have seen those other videos. If not to worry. I'm going to post this video in the several Facebook groups where you probably saw this post. And below, I'm going to post all the links for my previous videos. Now, this TOEFL exam changed once again, and this changes means that we have to also modify a few things that we're doing in our preparation. Not a whole lot, but you want to be aware of the changes that are taking place. So even though you may already know this information, and I apologize for being redundant, but I'm going to discuss the test as if you've never taken the test, the new test. That way you get all the information. And of course, once again, you're more than welcome to ask the questions that you want to. This is why we're here. You have an opportunity to speak directly with me, a TOEFL tutor, and you can ask any questions that you want to that are, of course, TOEFL related. So don't be afraid. No question is a silly question. All questions are welcome. Now, an important thing to note is I'm going to start by showing you guys, by sharing the screen and showing you my recent performance. Now, this performance that I had is the lowest one I've had in 13 years. I'm not happy about this performance, at least the reading and the listening section, but there is a reason behind that. A reason that I explained before in the previous videos that I put together, but I'll highlight it again here. Unfortunately, I had a horrible experience in the TOEFL exam, and I want to know if you had something like that too. I've been training students for nearly 13 years, and I always heard their stories about having issues with the test center, with the microphone not working, with the headset not working, not getting enough paper. And for me, it was always sort of like a myth because I had never had that experience until recently. When I took my exam, I had a horrible experience with both the listening and the reading section. Now, let me show you my grades first. And the reason why I want to show you these grades is just to show you. I always like the idea of transparency. For me, it's important that my students, at least, they know who is training them, and they know that I also take the TOEFL exam, and I can speak about the TOEFL exam based on my direct experience with it. In other words, I only teach my students the things that I know that will work in the test based on what I've done myself. So let me show you the grades here. Let me share the screen first and foremost. And here we go. So this is the regular TOEFL ETS screen. I'm going to log in right now. I'm going to do everything here live. Guys, those of you who've watched my videos before, you know I like to do things live so you can see what's going on. You can see the performances. And of course, once again, you can ask questions directly. Let me see. So this is my account. I'm logging in as if I were to log in my account to take a test or to book a test, for example. So this is my account right here. The scores are available. We're going to view my scores, and I'm going to tell you about my most recent performances. Okay, first, I'm going to show you the scores that I had on that day. Now, these are my performances for July 26th. Once again, horrible situation in the reading and the listening section. But it's not the test that was complicated. Let me make that perfectly clear. The TOEFL test was not the problem here. The problem here was actually the test center. For the reading section, I had an issue where the computer, for some reason, slowly faded into a gray screen halfway through the first passage. The proctors came in and tried to fix what was happening with me. They asked me to step out of the room. They allowed me to enter back. It was me and two other guys. So it was a collective issue, I guess. They tried to fix the situation. But by the time that I was able to sit back into the computer, about 12 minutes have gone by. So the time kept on running when I was out, of course. And when I got back to do the test. Of course, I didn't have that much time to complete the activity, and I purposely left 4 questions unanswered. The reason why I left those questions unanswered is because I didn't want to guess and maybe get them right, because then that wouldn't show the true performance that I had in that test. Notice I don't take the test to apply to any schools or to any services. So for me, even though it's not my best performance, it's not really relevant if I get 22 or 30. In the listening section, this performance is actually connected to the fact that during the entire first conversation, when I was ready to listen to the instructions, I noticed the audio was not coming in. So I raised my hand, the proctor came in, and I told them, I can't hear anything right now. The menu, the instructions should be playing right now, and I cannot hear anything. The guy did his best. I was angry at the moment. Now I'm a bit calmer, but I was very upset because he was trying to fix it, and I kept telling him, you need to change my headsets right now. I cannot listen to anything, either unplug it or plug. I could not physically tamper with the computer myself. If I did that, my test would be canceled. So I told him, please fix the issue. He did his best. He found, I think he plugged it and plugged it back in. I was waiting once again outside. By the time he asked me to come back in, unfortunately, you cannot pause a TOEFL test. So, of course, by the time that I got in, the entire first conversation was over. So I couldn't answer the first 5 questions. In order, once again, not to, let's say, have a lucky guess, I tried to pick answers that seem like an exaggeration or not true, just to guarantee a mistake in the first activity, because once again, I didn't want to get them right and then just have a high performance by luck. So these performances mean, for me, that in the reading section, out of the 20 questions that were done, the ones that I answered, there was 1 or 2 mistakes in my responses. So even in my case, I wouldn't have gotten a perfect 30 in the reading section. The listening section with this performance means that I had 1 mistake in the ones that I did answer. So my true performance could have been like a 27 and a 29 and a 28. Not a perfect grade, but significantly better than this. Now, that explains those low performances there. Just want to be very clear about it, because some students are thinking, this means the TOEFL test is more complicated. No, it's not. If you look at my history of performances, which I'm going to show you here, if you see my grades before in the listening and the reading section, notice that they're significantly higher. Not always 30, but once again, higher performances nonetheless. Now, considering that not all of you are going to have a horrible experience with your test center, let's imagine that we're taking the official exam. Now that you've seen my grades, let's get back to the discussion here. What is my recommendation, guys, in the reading section? First and foremost, if you have any question about the reading section, once again, either raise your hand and keep it up, like not physically, just click on raise hand so I know you have a question about the reading section. And I'll address your question once again as we proceed. For the reading section, guys, the new exam only gives you 2 passages. Let me repeat, we no longer have to guess whether you're going to get 3 or 4 passages. You're going to get only 2 passages. And because we only have 2 passages, that means we have 20 questions to address, 20 questions to answer. And the timing of those questions is the same timing that you would have per individual passage if you have 4 or 3 passages, which means you have about 18 minutes to do each passage. Now, because there's only 2 of them, you have to start right away at full speed. Before, when I had 4 passages in all of the other exams that I took, when I saw 4 passages, honestly, I started up a little bit slowly because in my mind, I'm thinking, we have plenty of time. You know, there's still an hour and 12 minutes when I begin with the activity. I can do this. In fact, I used to finish the reading section, no lie, sometimes 20 minutes ahead. But of course, I'm not the greatest example to follow there because I can read quickly, and the strategies that I use for the TOEFL exam allow me to answer the questions very efficiently and very quickly. But this new test is significantly different because since there's only 2 passages, you need to start at full speed right away. You cannot have the same freedom that you had before, where you would say in one passage, maybe it took me 20 minutes instead of 18 minutes. And in the next passage, maybe it took me 20 minutes again. And the next passage, I did it in 18 minutes. But the time that I get to the last passage, I only have 14 minutes remaining. Because many of you probably thought, well, but if I have 4 passages, one is not going to count. Fingers crossed, maybe the one that doesn't count is the one that I didn't do well. That is no longer a choice. Everything you do counts now. So my advice, I'm going to give you a short advice here. Once again, in the group lessons that I mentioned off the record, I'm going to be breaking down everything about the reading section. Strategies, types of questions, elimination technique, how to read properly, how to read even if you do not fully understand what's going on, and how to address these questions. But the one that I want to give you here is a simple one. Use the advantages you have in the reading section. The most obvious advantage in the reading section is the fact that you can go back and forth. You can move to a question and then go back to another question if you need to. In the entire TOEFL test, this is the only time where you can do that. The only section that you can go back and forth is the reading section. So please use that feature. Here's what I mean. Here's what I recommend. If the first passage that you see, let me actually give you an example. Let's show something live here. If the first passage that you see is a passage that you consider to be complicated, what do I mean by complicated? All of you have different backgrounds. Some of you are pharmacists, some are nurses, some are dentists, some can be regular students. Maybe you are a journalist or a lawyer. Doesn't matter. We have different backgrounds. I'm a psychologist, for example. That's my major, but I've been teaching for nearly 14 years. So if you give me a topic about psychology, I'm going to feel comfortable. But maybe you, if you are a pharmacist, maybe you hate that topic. So if the first topic that you see, once again, there's only 2 of them. If the first topic that you see is one that you do not really enjoy, you think it's going to be complicated, and I want you to judge only based on the title. You're not going to read, for 5 minutes and then realize, you know what, I want to change my topic. No, just the title. Let me show you. If you go through the information and you realize, you know what, this topic might be complicated, I don't like this so much, then please skip the entire thing. Start from the second topic. Go to the next passage and see if that passage is a bit better for you. Let me show you here. Imagine this activity right here, right? It says the development of instrumental music. If I read that in the real exam, I go, nope, I don't want to read about music right now. You need to understand your weaknesses and ask yourself, which reading topics I hate? Where do I suck in the reading section? For me, it's botany. I hate topics about plants. I love psychology, I love history, I love science. But a topic about plant life puts me to sleep right away. In this case, it's about art. Maybe arts too. I don't like art stuff so much. So, still coughing. So, if the first topic that I see is about music, I'm hitting next. In the real exam, it's not like this. You have here in the corner, you would have the buttons to go back and forth, to go next and back. Just hit next 10 times. Students tell me, man, that takes a long time. No, it doesn't. It's 10 clicks. It goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then you'll be in the second passage. Now, the second passage in this example says, the rise of classic Maya civilization. Okay, so it's about history. Maybe you also hate history, but at least now you know which are the topics. One is about art. The other one is about history. Which one you're going to begin with, that's completely up to you. But my recommendation is start with the easiest topic for you. Once again, easiest depends on your opinion. Why do I recommend this once again? Because if you start with the most challenging topic, chances are you may take an extra few seconds, an extra few minutes. And guess what happens? If you take a few extra minutes in the first passage, because it's the most complicated for you, right? And instead of doing it in 18 minutes, you did it in 21 minutes. You now have 15 minutes to complete the last passage. So now you automatically feel in a rush. You automatically feel more stressed. You now cannot read as well as you did before. And now anxiety kicks in. And this creates a domino effect that affects everything else in the TOEFL exam. For those of you who are pharmacists, raise your hand if you are. You know what happens if you fail the reading section. If you think, because you don't know at that moment, but if you think you failed the reading section, you're done. It doesn't matter if you get 30 in listening, speaking, and writing. If you don't get that 22 in the reading section and you are a pharmacist, you know that the test is now no longer something you can pass. So that kind of pressure, it's a lot. But that's one of the things that you need to work with. As a TOEFL tutor and as a psychologist, I help my students deal with both, with TOEFL and with stress. The TOEFL exam is probably the most, or one of the most stressing exams out there. Because, and I'll be on the record here, because the TOEFL test is a lie, guys. It's not true. The TOEFL test does not evaluate your English level. It evaluates your TOEFL skills. Maybe all of you can speak the language well enough to work in your environment. Maybe, yes, you may have an accent. Maybe, yes, you may need to improve your vocabulary. Sure. Maybe you're not an expert in all the topics you see in the TOEFL exam. That's quite okay. But I assure you that the vast majority of you guys here, all 80 of you here listening, you probably can work well in your environment. The only thing keeping you from really being able to work in your area as much as you want to is a test. But it's not a test that you can learn, that you can study for. This is the problem that the vast majority of my students have. They come into the TOEFL exam thinking this is an academic test. It is not. It's a skill-based test. You want to use your English proficiency, of course, but you want to learn the skills that the TOEFL exam is evaluating from you. That's what really matters here. It's not whether you know 1,000 words. It's not whether you're an expert in arts or psychology or chemistry. It's about whether or not you can read something well and answer the questions. So for the reading section, guys, the strategy that I want to share with you today is the following. Once again, please make sure that you start with the most manageable passage according to your own criteria. Make sure, for the love of everything that you own dear, make sure that you're reading carefully. Guys, the reading section for me is a section that I typically work with the most with my students, that in the speaking section. Because students in general are not a huge fan of reading. I think we can all admit that. We don't like to read these topics. Most students look for keywords, look for key ideas, for key elements, and that is the most damaging way to read this section. Because you're not reading, you're searching. We don't have time to search. You want to read and try, keyword try, to absorb as much content as you can. I don't expect you to remember everything in the reading section. No one can, not even I, remember everything in the reading section. But I expect you to read a sentence and try your best to understand the sentence, and then repeat the process as many times as you need to until you finish that paragraph. And then you have an idea about the paragraph. And with that idea, you may be able to eliminate the incorrect answers and leave only the right answer. As I mentioned, if you struggle in any of these sections and you want a more in-depth approach here, guys, the course that I'm putting together, not because I'm doing the course, but I think it's going to be amazing because it's going to break down activities in a very easy manner. The lessons are limited to only 15 students per lesson, so the space is closing up. But the idea there is to create an environment in which students can learn, make mistakes, feed off each other's activities, and really understand the strategies that I'm telling you. Because telling you about it is one thing, showing you is a completely different game. So if you really feel that you're stuck with the TOEFL exam, please get help. There's a bunch of people that can help you. I'm not the only one, luckily. So make sure to get help whenever needed. Now, before I go on to any other section, let me address some of the questions that I have right here. And to remind you, if you want to ask me a question using the microphone, please raise your hand so I can acknowledge the question. So I'm going to read some of the questions here. Once again, if I leave any questions unanswered, please highlight them for me. Masara, I see your hand going up. Please go ahead. You can unmute the microphone. There we go.
Sorry, hi. I just wanted if you could explain more about the template for the new writing essay, that would be great.
We're going to get there. We're going to get there by
Okay.
section, Zara. So we'll get to the writing section in the
Perfect.
meantime.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Yes, I'm going to address. But once again, those of you who know me, you guys know that I don't like that word template. Hate that word actually. I'm going to show you patterns. I'm going to show you forms to write it. But this idea of fill in the blank template, for me at least, I respect whoever does it that way. But for me, doesn't seem to be the best way to do it. Because simply put, guys, as I mentioned this every single video, if there was a way that I can show you a template that can guarantee you a 25 plus in the writing section, trust me, I'll put that on a book and I'll sell the book or I'll give it to you guys. But the reason why that template is not a guarantee is because the questions can change slightly. And if you're always using the template, you may be off the mark of the question. So make sure to react to the question well. Maria, go ahead. I see your hand going up.
Hi, whenever I'm solving the questions, I like answer it correct, but it's like it takes a lot of time. But when I'm taking the exam, it takes like I just screw up every time. I just don't know what happens there.
Well, in this case, Maria, the recommendation that I'll give you is the following. When you mention that it takes you a long time to answer the question, analyze exactly what you're doing. What is actually taking a long time? Is it because you're rereading the question multiple times? The topic, the paragraph? Is it because you're searching for keywords and you're taking a while there? Is it because the elimination technique is not being done quickly? We need to understand what is causing the issue. I like to take the TOEFL exam, to teach the TOEFL exam, almost like a doctor. See, we have an issue. We have, let's imagine, an illness, the TOEFL. In order for me to cure it, we need to understand what's causing the illness. So when you tell me, for example, it takes me a long time, my advice is when you do a reading section, time yourself per question so you can see how long it takes you in each question. That way, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Initially, when I'm solving the passage, I'm all good. But with time, because of the 3 or 4 passages, I lose focus and concentration and I'm unable to answer the other questions.
Well, keep in mind that now there's only going to be 2. So once again...
Yeah, this one is 2. So now I'm scared that it's just going to be 2 and a little less time. More like, so that would be a problem too, I think.
But once again, we start with steps. Just like in medicine, when we start treating something, we start with medicine and see how well you react to the medicine. In this case, the first recommendation is that time yourself per question. That way you can see, for example, I'll give you an idea. I did this with a student earlier today. I don't know if you can see it. Here I have, this is all the time the person took in each question, for example. Now, all your phones have that feature. That's just a stopwatch with the lap feature. So, for example, in this student, the average timing that she did for this question was actually pretty fast. It was about 45 seconds. But there were a few questions where she took 2 minutes and 30 seconds, then another one, 3 minutes. So the idea there is to ask yourself questions. Why did I take 3 minutes in one question? What was happening there? If you get to the bottom of that answer, you can start making changes. So always analyze what it is that you are doing and see how that can be improved. It's all about improving the little things.
Is there any way to improve the focus while reading? Like, I always get distracted whenever I'm reading.
Distracted doing what exactly?
Like, whenever I'm reading a paragraph to answer a question, if I don't read the options like side by side, which takes longer, so I get distracted very easily.
Oh,
so I read the options.
Let me address that before I go to another question. The problem there is that you're not reading, you're searching. If you read the choices, then your mind is searching for content. You're searching for similarities there. And that's a problem. ETS is very good at showing you things that look similar, but may not be answered in the question. You want to read the question, sure. You can read the question ahead of time, but this goes to everybody. Do not read the answer choices. Because if you read the answer choices, as you read, if you encounter something similar to that, you're immediately going to think that's the correct answer, but it may not be. So be very careful. One of the criteria of eliminations that I teach, I'll give you one, is if the answer choice is mentioned in the reading, but is not answering the question, then it's not a correct answer. It doesn't matter if it is exactly the same thing that is mentioned in the reading. If I ask you, what's your name? And you tell me, I'm a pharmacist, that's not the correct answer. Maybe the reading said that, but it's not answering the question. Now, let me switch to Erica. Erica, I see your hand going up. Go ahead.
Thank you.
My pleasure. All right, Erica, let's put you on hold. Tasabi, go ahead.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for doing this show for us.
My pleasure.
So, actually, the elimination technique doesn't work with me. I don't know why. It's work in all of the questions except for the filling the table or the pro summary
The summary
and
question.
inference and also the rhetorical purpose. For those three, every time I get the wrong answers when I'm using it.
Ooh, interesting situation, because typically the elimination technique is a strategy that many people associate the elimination technique with things that we've created. I always remind students, this is not something I put together. The elimination technique is the method that we have used in the United States to address multiple choice questions since the 1940s, I think. That's what I was taught when I was in elementary school, for example. So the elimination technique can be very helpful if you have the right tools. You see, in order to execute the elimination technique, you need to have the right tools to make that happen. If you're not reading the whole content, for example, if you don't read the whole paragraph, you can eliminate because you don't have the full picture, for example. You cannot eliminate and select an answer unless you've seen all the choices. So for the elimination technique, for example, you have to weigh in all 4 choices. If number 1 looks amazing, I'm not going to choose it right away. I still have to eliminate the other 3. So it's a process. And that's what I teach my students. You have to see this as a process. And you have to be disciplined and do the process every single time. The elimination technique, when done correctly, can be beautiful, can be really, really amazing for the entire reading and listening section. But you have to have the right tools. Go ahead.
Do you think I should keep doing it or improve my skills for vocabulary, or what I should do? Because it takes time for me when I'm reading the paragraph and explains. I didn't know all the vocabulary over there. I try to simplicate the passage with my own words to understand that one. But this is a take time for me.
I like the idea that you mentioned. Sorry to interrupt you. The idea of reading and paraphrasing the content. By the way, all of you have your hands up. Keep them up. I'm going to get to you guys. The idea of reading the paragraph and turning it into your own words is absolutely amazing. I don't want you to stay with the words that ETS gives you because they're going to be complicated, to be honest with you. So the idea is always paraphrase that into words you understand. Now, the fact that it takes time, the fact that this activity takes a while, it's perfectly fine. The important thing is you must be able to read the information as well as you possibly can and go through the content. Once again, eliminate based on what you read. If you actually read the content, you have the information to eliminate. But if you didn't read that well meaning each paragraph. Here's what most people think that I mean by reading. Reading is not just go, done, I read everything. Because if you do that and I ask you, sure, tell me what happened in the paragraph. What most of my students do, they tell me, wait, give me another second. And I say, nope, tell me what happened in the paragraph now. I don't know. Great. Then that amount of time you went to just read quickly was a waste of time. Because you didn't get anything from it. Take your time. My strategy is crazy because I tell students, in order to improve your reading section, you have to read slowly. And everyone lose their mind and say, but the time. Put it this way. The time is important, and yes, we acknowledge the time limitation. But if you choose between answering out of 20 questions, let's imagine, answering 15 questions correctly, and let's say you only answer 15 questions, and all of them were perfect, or you answer all 20 of them, but because you were rushing, you made 7 mistakes. Which one will give you a better result? Now, don't get me wrong, I never advocate the idea of not answering all the questions, but you want to read. If you look at it from this perspective, to all of you guys, and I'll address a few questions and we'll move on. This is the only section that you actually do not engage properly, because in the listening section we listen, in the speaking section we certainly speak, and in the writing section, of course, you type. So why is the reading any different? Why are we not going to read everything in the reading section? That's what I invite everyone to do. So my advice there is, if the elimination is not working, ask yourself, when you select an answer, this goes for all of you guys. When you select an answer, regardless of the technique you're using. If the answer is A and you pick B, do not just move on. Ask yourself, wait a second, why did I not pick A? What was I seeing here that led me to pick the wrong answer? If you get to the bottom of that answer multiple times, then you can start making changes. But if you simply just go, oh, I made 2 mistakes. No, I need you to obsess with those 2 mistakes and figure out why did you have those 2 mistakes. If you make that happen, performances will improve. Now, let me move on here. Let's see, Erica, go ahead and unmute the microphone and you can ask the question.
Hi, thank you very much. I was willing to ask you, what do you think about testing online at home?
When it comes to taking a test at home, here's the benefit of an online of a test at home. The benefit is that if you have the right equipment, for example, if you live in a place where the internet connection is manageable, let's say it's a fast internet connection, and you take the test at a moment where there's not 1,000 people online, for example, do not take a test on a Saturday afternoon. It's going to be crazy because people are going to be online. The connection is not going to be great. Depending on where you live, that could be an issue. But if you have all the tools, the right camera, a great microphone, doesn't have to be something like this, by the way, but a microphone that you can be heard properly, a keyboard that you feel comfortable typing, a place that is not going to be a distraction. You're not going to have people coming in. I mean, it's a great opportunity. Honestly, considering my experience in the last test center, I'm taking the next exam at home. However, make sure that you understand the necessity of your TOEFL test. Because depending on why you need the TOEFL test, some institutions, some requirements do not allow the test to be taken at home. So always make sure that you're taking a test that would work for your requirements. But honestly, I like the at-home edition. Now, the negative aspects are, if there's any inconveniences with the technology, if you get disconnected, if you start interacting and you start looking to the sides, for example, during the exam, your exam can be canceled. So you have to make sure that, once again, you take that into consideration. If you live in an area where there's no issues with technology, the internet is fine, the power grid is okay, go ahead. It's really comfortable. I've taken the test at home 3 times, and I've enjoyed them all every single time because it's my chair, it's my screen, my office. I know how to work my keyboard. This last test that I took, the keyboard was awful. So little things like that can affect you. But once again, if you're a pharmacist, you can take the test at home, for example, and other professionals may not be able to take it. But I've had great experiences with the test at home. It's not the same for everybody, though. I've heard horrible experiences with the test center, with the test being taken at home. But in my case, I've had great experiences every single time.
For teachers?
Teachers, you mean like teachers in, for example, those teachers I normally work with are the ones who want to get a certification in Texas, mostly. I believe they can take it at home, but the keyword is believe. Double check that with the requirement itself. Don't take my word there for granted. Always double check to make sure you're taking the right test.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Let's see, Anila, go ahead. I see your hand going up.
Hi. Thank you for having us.
Sure thing, go ahead.
I'm struggling with the speaking part. I keep scoring 25 and I don't know what to do anymore. I feel lost. I need 26. I'm a pharmacist.
I'm gonna circle back to you in this question. This is gonna be a very common question. Once we get to the speaking section, trust me, I'll get back to this question because this is all my pharmacists. They will give an arm up to figure out the secret of the 26, which I'll tell you for sure. Once again, I'm gonna address to you guys how I got 30 points in that section. So
okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Let me move up quickly. Once again, I see you guys up, but let me address a few questions here that I have in the chat to also address the questions here. I'm going to read the questions out loud and then address the questions, guys. So here, for example, do I recommend the website to use? Guys, when it comes to websites, honestly, the TPO sites are typically the most suitable ones. ETS is now offering a free evaluation with a new academic writing discussion question, which I'll leave all those links in the comment section where I post these videos. Okay, once again, I'm going to mention this towards the end. Guys, I try to be as reachable as possible. If you have a question, you can always message me on Facebook. You can send me a message. Sometimes I take a while to reply, trust me, because I get an abundance of message. But if you have questions specifically about this, I will always try to answer those questions. Now, once again, those of you with the hands up, keep them there. Okay, some of you guys I want to be in the group. Once again, the group that I'm putting together, just to remind you quickly, it's a set of group lessons. It's 4 weeks long. Each week, we're going to cover one section. So 1 week only writing, 1 week only speaking, 1 week only reading, and another one only listening, to really break down everything here. Okay, once again, that information I'll give you guys towards the end. Let's see, a few more questions, and then I go back to the hands. There's a lot of you here, guys. I will try to answer all your questions. Let's see if that happens to me. Is it better to cancel the test and complete another day? Okay, so this is a question regarding my experience with the exam. Yeah, I mean, yes, honestly, if you have a technical issue, the best case scenario is to cancel the grade and to report that to ETS. I reported that to ETS. I had the emails. I sent them 4 emails. One of them was the same day when I arrived from the exam, 2 hours later. I gave them a thorough email telling them what happened. The response to me was, send us a message back in a couple of days because your test still appears as scheduled. Okay, so I said, okay, well, all right. Maybe they haven't received the report from the test center. Okay, that seems reasonable. I sent them a message 2 days later with the same message. Hey, guys, you guys screwed me up in these 2 sections. I don't want you to report my grades. I want to cancel those grades and receive the compensational voucher to take the test again. No reply. I sent them a message again. No replies. And then when I was teaching a lesson a couple of days ago, I received the email, your grades are out. And I was like, I don't want my grades to be out. So ETS dropped the ball there. Typically, they're pretty good with these situations, but in my case, they were awful. Once again, for me, I don't mind because I'm not using my grades, but if that were you, yes, if you have a technical issue that keeps you from taking the test with the same chances as everyone else, you should cancel the test at the end of the test. Complete your exam, get the experience, do the speaking, do the writing. You will not get the grades, but at the end of the exam, say, I want to cancel the grades, I don't want to report my grades. And when you get home, reply to ETS and message ETS and tell them what happened. So yes, if it happens to you guys, the best course of action is to report it. Another question here, will they return the money back? No, ETS rarely gives you the money back. Extremely rare occasions. They normally give you a voucher, like a code for you to schedule another test at no cost to you. Questions here, once again, guys, keep the hands up. Did I get any vocabulary questions? Of course. The same 8 types of questions. Main ideas, negative facts, vocabulary, purpose, paraphrasing, coherence questions. Well, I'm missing one. Paraphrasing. Wait, hold on. Let's go back because I missed one. Main idea questions. Oh, there we go. Main idea questions. Negative facts, vocabulary, inference questions, purpose questions, paraphrasing questions, insertion questions, and summary questions. I had all those questions. They were the questions that I had. So the same type of questions. The level of difficulty in the reading didn't change, guys. Let's see. Okay, let's address the questions that have your hands up. Jay, please go ahead and unmute the microphone and proceed with your question. After we go, one second there. After we go through these questions, we're going to go to the listening section. Sorry that I'm taking a while here. Jay, go ahead.
Hi, Mike. How are you? I wanted to ask you with regards to the summary question.
Tell me about it.
Do you have like a specific way that we can guarantee to get the 2 points?
Ooh, certainly. I'll give you that information. That's one that we can address immediately. Yes, guys, for the summary question, that's the most hated question to some extent. Is one of the only 2 questions that we know for sure will appear in the order that it does appear. The only thing we know for sure is that the last question is a summary question, and the second to last question is the insertion question. Those are the only questions we know for sure where they're going to appear. The vast majority of you may be doing this question incorrectly. Let me show you an example here very quickly. Quickly is a keyword here. Let me share the screen. All right, so let's imagine we're doing this question here, and we go to the summary question, right? So if we're doing the summary question here, now what most people do is they're trying to find the 3 most important ideas from the story, or the 3 general ideas from the story. That's absolutely not what you have to do here. Let's be honest about one thing. The vast majority of you do not read these instructions. Don't know why, you should. But most of you do not read the instructions. And the instruction says that an introductory sentence for a brief summary is provided below. So we have a sentence here. This sentence is our summary. We don't have to look for the summary. It is right here. What we need to do is we need to find 3 sentences that complement this sentence. Of course, these complements must be mentioned in the reading. It must be true according to the reading. And they must connect with this idea. So we're not looking at 3 general ideas. We're not eliminating things because they're specific. We're eliminating things that are not mentioned, that are not true, or are not connected with this sentence. So if you read the sentence, if you read the story carefully, and you have an idea what's happening here, I don't. I just selected a random topic here. But if I read this, I would have an idea of what's going on here, and I'll be able to connect 3 sentences that connect to this narrative. If you connect your statements with that narrative, you'll find the correct answers. But just like everything, I do not look for the right answers. I eliminate the mistakes. So whenever I'm doing the activity, I address these questions the same way that I do any other question. I eliminate 3 choices. So if I eliminate 3 choices, if I have the summary question and I eliminate 3, the 3 remaining answers, those are my choices. I am extremely devoted and disciplined about the elimination technique. If you do that well, guys, it will change your perspective in the reading and the listening section. Now, I have one student here called Zoom user. I don't know how to address you. Please go ahead and unmute your microphone and address your question. Oh, okay. I believe that hand went down. Okay, if you figure it out, let us know. If not, Afshan, go ahead, please unmute your microphone and address your question. There we go.
Hi. I'm asking about the listening. Like I wrote in the Facebook also, could please discuss about the listening, because I always find the 2 correct. I eliminate the 2, whatever you taught me before, and I choose the 2, like 2 answers are very confusing. But always I got 19, like 19 and 20, and I need 22 in the listening. And I gave 5 time only for listening because I pass in reading also.
Right.
So what is the best strategy I will do for this?
Well, once again, we're going to hold those questions, and thank you for the question here. We're going to hold the questions connected with any other area of the exam. By the time, for the moment where we discuss the listening section, that's coming up. We're going to discuss listening in a minute here. Regarding a few questions here, let's see. Shireen, go ahead. Please address your question. Keep in mind, keep the questions based on the reading section so we can move on to the listening in a second. Shireen, go ahead.
It was the same question regarding the summary question. Thank you.
Oh, good. Glad that I answered that question. And Arlene, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I had a question based on the link you sent for the practicing with the reading, the one you were showing.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to see the answers?
Oh, yeah, they're right there. Let me show you. If I want to check these answers, this button right here, of course, I don't know Chinese, but you can translate that to English. They'll show you the answers right there. So it applies to any question. If you click on this question, for example, this button will show you the answer.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. Because I was practicing, but I couldn't answer. I was like, what? I don't know.
That's a way to get it. Of course, do keep in mind, whenever you check the answers, make sure that if you selected, for example, letter C, and you realize it's A, don't just move on to the next question. Ask yourself, okay, hold on, why? Why did I pick this choice? What was it about this choice that I liked? And what did I not see here that made me want to delete that mistake? It's about constant, going back and checking what's going on there. My pleasure. Now, let's see here. A few more questions, guys, and then we're going to move on to the listening section. If not, we'll never get away from here. And I know many of you want to go to the speaking and writing section. For those of you who have your hands up, once again, please leave the question in the chat. I will address those questions, but before the end of the evening, I'll stay here for as long as I need to, but I want to move up in case you guys are in a rush. By the way, I believe one of you guys says you're driving. Please be careful. If you're driving, do not interact with anything here. Stay on the road. Be careful. So, guys, if you're safe, watch the video and interact. If you're driving or doing something else, pay attention to what you're doing. Now, guys, so let's move on to the listening section. If not, we'll stay here forever. Once again, all of the questions that you may list below, I'm going to try to answer. Once again, If for whatever reason I cannot reach your question, please, 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 don't be afraid to message me on Facebook, guys. Once again, if you message me there, I'll be able to address your doubts. I'll be able to address your activities. Just to show you, for example, in case you guys don't see me or maybe you don't see my profile, this is what my profile looks like. I'm going to leave a link below for you to just click on it and message me if you need to. This is my Facebook profile right here. So once again, if you need to message me, just send me a message. I'll do my best to reply to you as quickly as possible. And as I said, I'm going to leave my link here. If you think you need to message me because I'm not getting to your questions, once again, just make sure to keep that link open or click on the link that I'm going to send you and send me a message. That's the easiest way to reach out to me. Now, going on to the listening section. Let me just leave my link below. If you check the chat right now, I'm leaving the link to my Facebook account. Just click there and message me there. Now, the listening section, guys. Honestly, the listening section suffered almost no changes in this new exam. We have now a shortened version of the listening section. It's the same version that we had before if you had 4 passages. If you had 4 passages before, then you would have 2 sets in the listening section. That means 1 conversation in 1 lecture, 1 set, and 1 conversation in 2 lectures, another set. So in total, you would have 2 conversations in 3 lectures. The level of difficulty in the listening section honestly didn't change whatsoever. Had it not been for the fact that I did not get a chance to listen to the first activity, I probably would have gotten like a 29 or 28 in this activity. Sorry, there was still 1 mistake, which I own completely. But the topics are not more complicated. The information is not more challenging. It's the same level of difficulty you see in a TPO assignment. Now, my advice for the listening sections. First and foremost, note taking is important. But when you take notes, guys, I do not want you to take notes as if you're writing a paragraph. Please, that's very complicated later for you to look at your notes and find the information quickly. Okay, the way that I recommend taking notes is do it in columns. Write words, 1 word here, 1 word there, 1 word here, 1 word there, for example. In the group classes that I'm going to be teaching, one of the days is almost dedicated entirely to just teaching you how to take notes effectively and how to use those notes. Writing notes is helpful. It's not a necessity. Some of you prefer not to take notes. Honestly, I don't like either extreme. I do not like students who take lots of notes because you're going to get distracted. And I don't like students who rely on no notes whatsoever because some of these lectures are 4 or 5 minutes long. Honestly, you won't be able to remember details if you're not taking notes. So note taking is absolutely important. But please do not try to write down sentences, just words. The theory that I use when taking notes is the connect the dots approach. Just like when we were little and we have to connect the dots in an image to figure out, once again, the way those notes work, I recommend you to write in a way where you're connecting dots here. So only 1 word here and 1 word there, 1 word here and 1 word there, and that'll help you get a better understanding of these activities. Now, I'm going to give you an example here. Once again, this example is going to make no sense to you, but let me show you in action how my notes look like. This is some of the notes that I was taking before in a class that I taught this morning. Let me show you quickly. Once again, they're going to make 0 sense to you, but let me show you at least the appearance of the notes. So when I take notes, I do so like this. Once again, in 2 different columns, so 1 word right here, another word right here. And my idea is that this word will connect with this one with this one, and so on. They all connect like this, for example. And that way, I'll be able to understand what's going on there. So while I cannot recall in details this topic was about a school club. It was a conversation where the guy wanted his own office for a lounge, this is misspelled, a lounge space for his club. The lady told him he had to share the office with others, but there were dividers in the office, so everything will be divided in sections. In order to do that, the guy had to fill out a form. The name of the group is Williams Photography, so Williams Photography there. He's part of the arts department. However, his club is not registered. So they're missing the registration, once again, registration missing. And the guy has to go to the website. Once again, sorry, this club, my apologies. For what I remember, they can create their own websites, they can have audios there, and they can post the content on campus. Now, I did this like at 8 a.m. this morning, but I still recall this activity because once again, the words that I wrote can connect with one another. If you write the words, and instead of doing it like this, for example, you're writing your words like this, all together, then it becomes very complicated later for you to figure out how are these, where is the key word, what is the right idea, what do I have to find? So my approach, once again, and what I teach my students is how to do this like this. Separate it into a column, that way you can have an idea here and an idea there. If you do it like that, and once again, and you learn the process, this could really simplify your note-taking approach. That's what I mean by taking notes in 2 columns. Once again, showing you right now it's one thing, teaching you how to do it is a whole different thing. But please try not to take your notes in a bunch. Separate the notes, keep them separate so you can see what's here and what's there. Now, once again, the listening section honestly didn't have that many changes, or there were no changes here. Honestly, if you've taken the test, you know, this year, the previous year, 2 or 3 years ago, it's going to be the same thing, guys. So make sure that you're paying attention to the content. I always tell my students, we can't complain about this section. You know, if you tell me, Mike, but the listening is too fast or too complicated or too slow, guys, we can't do anything about it. If you think that's the case, then I advise you to practice your listening with complicated situations. That way, maybe, once again, oops, sorry, maybe with noise around you. An important thing to mention about this, I'm glad that I remember. Guys, pay attention, please. This new TOEFL test has no breaks. It's reading, listening, speaking, and writing all one after each other. You're not going to take a 10-minute break anymore. I don't know how it happened, or I don't know why it happened. I've taken the test over 40 times, and this is the first time that I can see this. In this test center where I took the test, for some reason, they allow us to sit in for the exam, all of us at the same time. So we all started the test essentially at the same time. Now, it doesn't take a genius to realize that if that happens, then we're going to get to the speaking section almost simultaneously, almost all of us at the same time. Guys, it was noisy. It was very loud during the speaking section. All the issues that I had in the listening and the reading section somehow ended up helping me because I was like 3 minutes behind everybody. So while everyone was just yelling about something, I was still listening, I was still finishing some things. So I strongly recommend, if you are a soft listener, a person who gets distracted with any outside noise when you're listening, please start exercising those skills. Listen to your TOEFL, open a window and listen to the outside noise, turn on the radio in the kitchen and put it at full volume so you can hear it, but not distract you so much. If you have a television behind you, turn it on, preferably in a channel where it's like a news channel or maybe even a foreign channel. I used to put a lot a French channel called TV5 or TV5, and it would just be in the background in French. Why a different language? Because I wouldn't understand what's going on, but there was some background noise there. So get used to listening with noise. That's going to be a game changer for many of you. It's going to get loud in these test centers because everyone's getting to the speaking section almost at the same time. Normally, the test centers will sit you individually. So you go in, you register, they assign you a computer, and you start the test. That way, you wouldn't get to the same location at the same time. In my case, once again, it was awful. Everyone was speaking at the same time. And it was funny because everyone was copying each other's answers. Everyone was giving the same answer, basically. So get used to working with noise. Now, guys, at this point, any questions about the listening section? The listening section, please let me know. We're going to start the speaking in a second, but any questions or doubts about listening, I'm all ears. I'm going to be reading a few questions here to make sure I address the questions in the chat here. How many questions in total in time? Well, the total overall number of questions that we have to address, guys, is the following. Let me do the math. It's 5 questions in a conversation, 6 questions in the lecture. So we have, once again, 2 conversations and 3 lectures, so it's 28 questions in the listening section. 28 questions in listening, 20 questions in reading, 4 questions in speaking, and 2 questions in the writing section. Now, let's see, Shireen, I see your hand going up. Please proceed.
How I know which information is important, because I write everything and I miss the important ones. When I am listening, how can I check which one is important I have to write and which one is not important, for example?
Well, here's the thing. Same way that you don't want to read and try to read for keywords, you do not want to listen and focus on listening to what's important, because we don't know what's important. We don't know what the questions will be. So we need to assume that everything is important there. That's why you want to listen to the whole overall information. And if you're listening to the overall information, and let's say you missed a few things, if you're looking for the right answers, that will be a problem. But if you try to eliminate with the content that you heard, you should certainly be able to eliminate at least 3 choices. This is why the elimination technique is the best technique to address here, because it doesn't demand you to actually know what's going on. That's a significant benefit here. So that's why I'm telling you, the elimination technique, it's I don't want to call it the secret, it's very obvious, but it's a golden strategy here. If you do this well, if you really know how to do that well, it's going to change your perspective in the reading and the listening section, because you no longer have to know what's going on. You can acknowledge the fact and say, hey, in this listening, I understood 80%. Great. With 80%, you can eliminate the content. And if you eliminate 3, you only have 1 choice remaining. That should be your answer. But do not focus on listening for key ideas. We don't know the key ideas. You have to listen to the whole thing and take notes accordingly. But you do not want to take notes as if you're taking a dictation. Just as I show you, a word here, a word there, a word there, and a word there. If that's an issue, once again, the course that I'm putting together for listening would really dissect the note-taking strategies. Arlene, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Yes, what advice could you give us on the time management for the listening section? I struggle a little bit with that.
Well, time management in the listening section is very sneaky. You have to be careful here, because the time here starts, for example, if you see 6.5 minutes, that means you have 1 conversation and 1 lecture. If you see 10 minutes, you have 1 conversation and 2 lectures. You don't want to take more than a minute to address the question, to be honest with you. And luckily, because the listening section deals with our ability to hear, and that connects a lot more directly with our short-term memory and our comprehension, a lot more than reading, then you'll be able to eliminate a lot faster. But once again, you want to change the way you see things. When you look at the question, you want to look and see which one is the correct answer. When you look at the questions, you want to read the question carefully so you understand what's going on, but you want to ask yourself, which one is not correct? Try that, and you see how things will change. But if you try to figure out what is correct, then you're going to go, this is good, but maybe this looks good too. And you know what? I think I heard this. So it plays into your comprehensional biases, which is, I heard this before. Yeah, maybe you heard it in the conversation, but maybe that's not answering the question. So always stick to the question and see which choices are not answering that question. But if you focus on, I heard this or this was mentioned, it's gonna be a fun day for the listening section. That's where most of the mistakes happen. So pay attention to that part. Use your content to eliminate. Once again, if that's something foreign to you or you want more info, please consider getting help to understand how to do that effectively.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Now let's see a couple of questions. Guys, I see someone filling the table question. I hope I don't see it. Guys, that question hasn't appeared in the exam for several years. That's the categorizing information question in the reading section. ETS has not officially taken it out, not that I know of, but I haven't seen that question in years. So some TPOs have it, but I don't think you'll see that question in the exam, just to let you know. Carol, go ahead. I see your hand going up.
Hi, how are you? I just wanted to know if you can repeat how many questions there are in listening part.
In the listening question, there are 28 questions in total.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
To remind you, that's 5 in each conversation and 6 in each lecture.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
My pleasure. Let's see. I'm looking at a few questions here. Some of the questions that I have are about the reading section. I would like to be part of your group. Those of you who want to be a part of the group, once again, to highlight this carefully. If you consider or if you think that you may need help, I'll discuss it at the end. But if you think that you need help and you want to be a part of my private group lessons that are coming up next week, every week is going to be a different section. It's 4 weeks starting the beginning of August and ending at the end of August. Let me know your name and your email, and when I check the history of the chat, if I see your name and email, I'll send you the information. Let's see. Do I consider background noise as cheating in the home edition? Okay, I like this question. Do they consider any background noise as cheating in the home edition? I mean, when I'm reading the question out loud, when people are talking on the street and the noise they make can be heard, do they consider it as cheating? No, not at all. The only cheating that may take place at a home test is if someone interacts with you and you acknowledge the person. So for example, if I'm taking the test, imagine in a living room, and someone walks in and says, "Hi, Mike, how are you?" And I go, "Hey, what's up?" That acknowledgement could cost my test. So they could call me. You could have someone outside calling my name the whole hour. If I don't react to it, there's not a problem. When you take a test at home, make sure your eyes are on the computer. Focus on what you're doing. Your eyes can only go from here to here, which is your keyboard, and here. Only this. If I do this, even if you have pets, I had a student that her test was canceled and she was banned from taking the test for 1 year. It's a really weird punishment, to be honest with you. And she's a dentist, so that affected her dearly because she had a cat and a dog during the exam. She didn't close the door because if she closed the door, they would start scratching the door, and according to her, that would be annoying. So she left the door open, and they kept coming in. So she kept, interacting with the dog, calming the dog down, petting the cat here. But this interaction like that was enough for the evaluator to consider her doing something inappropriate, and her test was canceled, or her test was banned for 1 year. Once again, depending on your background, that could be very damaging. So if you're taking a test at home and you have any pets, don't have them near you. If you have people in your home, try to kick them out. The times that I've taken the test at home, my kids are not here. My wife and my kids go out, and it's just me and the test. In fact, one time that I was taking the test at home, a delivery guy kept ringing my doorbell. I was so annoyed. You can't interact with that. You cannot tell the test center, "Give me a second, let me get that package." The package, went back to the courier center. So you have to stay there the whole time. Now, Fatem, I see their question. Please go ahead.
Hi, I have a question regarding the listening.
Go ahead.
The question number one, always they ask, what's the purpose of the listening? What's the purpose
what's the passage mainly about? What's the conversation mainly about? What is the lecture mainly about? Yes.
I mean, most of usually what I do, I just eliminate the answers and stick with what I think it's right. But sometimes most of the answers, maybe 3 of them, is the same. Like I can't tell which one is which. So I just pick whatever I feel it's right.
When you mention the same, sorry to interrupt you halfway through it. When you mention the same, here's what normally happens. Typically, the answer choices are things that have been mentioned in the conversation. So, for example, imagine this idea. When the person starts talking to another one, if it is a conversation, they normally address the reason why they're talking right away. So, for example, the person would say, "Hi, I'm here to get information about the new library, for example, the new library IDs. Can you give me more information about it?" In that case, the conversation is about the person requiring info about getting the new library IDs.
Easy, but about not the conversations, about the lecture ones.
When it comes to lectures, sometimes the professor introduces something like, last week we talked about the reading section for TOEFL test and how to do the activity. Today, we're going to actually discuss the speaking section. So in that case, the discussion is not the first thing you hear, it's about the speaking section.
Okay. So the answer is in the beginning of the whatever the speaker said.
For the conversation, typically. But if it is a lecture, don't be surprised if halfway through the lecture, they change their mind.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
If they change their mind, ask yourself the following. How did the lecture end? On what topic? Typically, that's the main idea of the discussion.
Okay. That's that. I know it's not time for the writing, but please, I need to ask, please. So for the question number 2 with writing, when I did the practice test, okay, on ETS, the website, I always get 4 to 5 good, but always I get the 4. I try to, exceed the maybe the 150. One of them I wrote 150, and I checked the answer was really good, but still they gave me 4. But I don't know if this is the right thing. I mean, I don't know how to get the 5. I can send you on your, the the Facebook Messenger. I can send you
you can reach out, but I'll give you the answer right away. This one I'm going to break my way to the question just to address it quickly. Typically speaking, the ones that I've done recently, and I've done a lot of them recently, in order to get a 5, you need to make sure that you're very detailed about the illustration of your position. If you're not detailed enough, if you're not really squeezing those details out, you're not going to get that 5. And when it comes to the number of words, I have done with my students 100 words only, and typically I get 4 there. But when I push it to 150 to 180, I get a full 5 most of the time. In fact, this evening, if you guys are not bored yet, I will do a live activity with you. I did one before, but I'm going to do another one live to show you how I put it together.
So, but when I got the 4, that means it's good?
I mean, it's
still
good, yeah.
good?
If you get 2 4s, you get 24 points in the writing section.
Okay, sounds good.
There we go.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Now, guys, let's get to the actual, the elephant in the room here. Speaking section. How much time have we been here? Let me just check. 1 hour and 12 minutes. Okay, we're doing well. This is going to be like 2 hours, like a 2-hour meeting. Once again, sorry in advance if I'm keeping you here longer. Make sure you get your coffee, your drinks, get entertained, take notes. And once again, stay tuned for more, because towards the end, I'm going to open up the questions for any questions you may want to. Now, the speaking section, guys. This is the section that my pharmacy students hate the most. This is a section that most students are, let's say, the more self-conscious about, because you have to speak, other people will listen to you. It's not the most comfortable section. It's not. And, you only have 4 questions to address. The preparation time is very short most of the time. How did I manage to get 30 points in the speaking section? The simple answer is, I always do what ETS wants me to do. I'm going to show you here some examples. And for those of you who are part of the groups that I participate in, I have 2 Facebook groups. One is the TOEFL IBT study group, and one of the administrators there. And the other one is the OMG TOEFL study group. That's my group. I'm the only teacher in that group. I'm going to list those groups here for you, because I'm going to list in those groups. Feel free to request access, once again, to those groups. Here is the group that I'm telling you. That's the group that it's mine. And this is the other group where I participate. But in that group, there's 200,000 people there. So it's very easy to get lost in the comments there. Nonetheless, if you're not a part of those groups, I strongly suggest that you go to those groups, you click to become a member. Of course, that's completely free, because you can see the interactions and the activities that happen there. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because in those groups, I'm going to leave there links to sample answers for my speaking approach. So you can see exactly what I do in the exam and how I got those 30 points. So that should be quite important for you guys. So if you go to those groups, you'll see the video, you're going to see the recording of this video, and you're going to see, once again, samples, my activities, sample for the writing, sample for the speaking section. Now, once again, you can click on the links that I left you there, and you can get access to those groups. To remind you one more time, if you want information about my group classes, or you want to reach out to me, please either leave your name and email, or click on the following link that I'm going to leave there right now, so you can get access to my messages on Facebook. Simply send me a message, and I'll try my best to reply to you in the next few days at least. Now, going back to the speaking section. Guys, I'm going to break this down for you. I'm not going to go as detailed as I would in one of my lessons, because the time would not allow me to do it. But I want to show you the most important things that I want you to be aware about. It's extremely important that you listen here carefully. The speaking section is not so much about whether you sound academic, whether you use fancy words, whether you have a high-end vocabulary, whether you use templates. This is not really what the speaking is about. In fact, I repeat, I do not use templates in these activities. Simply put, because if the question changes a little bit, I would hate for you to think that Mike told me to say this and I'm going to get 30. And then you don't get 30, you're going to be disappointed. The important thing about the speaking section is please do what you're told to do. It's as simple as that. Most of you may be doing more than what you have to or not enough. Let me show you what I mean by this. Let me share the screen with you and let's talk about a speaking section here. Here we go. So right now you should be seeing here the first question of the speaking section, which is an independent question. Before, I couldn't tell you the question that I had in the exam, but now that my grades are out, I have no problem telling you about that question. The question was something like whether, as an employee, you prefer to be told exactly what to do, to be given clear instructions on what to do, or whether you prefer to complete your task creatively and be given the chance to complete the task any way you want to. That was a question that I had in the exam, something like that. I can't recall exactly. My answer to this question was, I prefer to be told exactly what to do. Now, why did I pick that choice? Simply put, it's the easiest way for me to answer it. My answer was something along the lines, if I'm being told what to do, then sorry. If I'm being told what to do, then the manager and the customers can expect the same quality all the time. And during my test day, I had a McDonald's restaurant right next to me. So I was mad when I was doing the speaking section because of all the things that happened in the listening and reading. So I had fun with this question, to be honest with you. I'm surprised I got a 30. I was expecting a 28 because this question, I didn't care for it. So I gave an example about a McDonald's employee. And I said, imagine me, something like this, I'm summarizing the question, the answer, of course. But I said, imagine a McDonald's employee that instead of following the instructions on how to make a proper burger, that person starts just adding ingredients randomly. If I'm a customer and I ask for a cheeseburger, but I get a bunch of extra ingredients in my cheeseburger, I will not be happy with that burger. And then I said, as a second idea, because you always want to give two statements into examples, I said, in addition, if the person does the task creatively, it may actually end up costing the company some money. And I went back to the same example. And I said, going back to the McDonald's example, which normally I don't do. Normally my second example is something completely different. But once again, I was not in the mood for that day. So I said, going back to the McDonald's employee, if as a customer, I asked for a Big Mac and the person gave me a burger filled with chicken, bacon, and ham, I'm not going to take that burger and I would probably ask for my money back. If that happens multiple times, that company could lose hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars because of the person being creative instead of following instructions. Something along those lines. Now, that's what I did in the exam. Once again, my grades, you guys saw it earlier, it was 30 points. But let's take a look at this question right here and see how we can address the question. The question says, when some people have a little extra money, not an extra $100,000, a little extra money, they like to spend it right away on something they enjoy, while others prefer to save the extra money. The question is, which do you like to do and why? So we need just to state one idea. There isn't a better or worse choice here. It's not that if you do one over the other, then you're going to do better than another. That's not the case there. Okay? So in this particular situation, in this particular task, what we want to keep in mind is choose one idea and support your statements. Be detailed about your statement. So here, for example, if I say, I prefer to, let's imagine, spend the money right away, my first reason could be, if I get a little extra money and I spend it right away, I can take advantage of sales at the moment. For instance, recently, there was a 70% sale in my favorite watch store. And since I recently came across a few extra tips in my job, I spent that money and bought myself a new watch. There we go. That could be the first example. And I can give a counter example and say, for example, in contrast, it's a counter example. I would say I'm not a really patient person. The whole idea of saving money for months to buy something in the future is not appealing to me. I lose patience quickly and I want to buy my things right away and get an instant gratification. That is why I don't save money in the long term. I spend my money, especially any extra little money right away. That could be some of the answer there. Now, if I want to go If I want to go, by the way, is the recording available on Facebook? It will be. This will be recorded and it will be posted on Facebook. For example, if I want to say I want to save my money, well, I can do the same answer. I like to save my money because I'm saving money for a special item. I'm saving money to buy a brand new watch that I can't wait to get. So when I get any little extra money, I put it in my savings and wait until I get all the money there. In addition, saving this extra money can actually amount to something later. If I save all the little extra money I get, maybe at the end of the year, I can take that money and take my kids on vacation. That is why I prefer to save any extra money that I get. Either or answer will be fine, but you need two statements, guys. If you only give me one, I have never done an activity, and I have experimented with this, but I've never done one activity when I only give one main idea and I get 30 points. Sure, I've gotten 28s, 27s, 29s, which is, of course, more than enough for many of you. But ideally, you want to give examples and details. Examples and details in plural. So, once again, two statements and two illustrations. For those of you asking when will I post it on Facebook, after the lesson is completed here, after we end the call, then it's going to take about half an hour to create the video and maybe another half hour to go on Facebook. But before the end of the night, I'll post it up. So just to let you know. So in this question, guys, please be detailed. Stop using these templates of, I want to do this because it relieves my stress and I can increase my circle of friends. Guys, that's so generic and it makes no sense half of the time. Some of these strategies you're using for question one are completely obsolete. Make sure you address the question correctly. If I ask you what's your name and you tell me that today is Thursday, I don't care for that answer. So make sure that you address the question well. I teach my students 6 different strategies, 6 different categories to react to these questions. Once again, if you need that information, that'll be available in the course later on. But to give you one of them, think about things you can use. Think about tangible things. Money, for example, is one of my favorite categories because money can be illustrated very easily. All you need is an amount. So when I said before that if I didn't follow instructions, it would cost the company money, saying it will cost the company money is not enough. I have to specify how much money I'm talking about here. So if I said it would cost the company tens of thousands of dollars in losses, now that is specific, and that is what you want. Be as specific as you can be. Now, that is question number 1, guys. Once again, an overall view. Those of you who need more help, once again, we can discuss that a lot more in detail. Before I go to question 2, let's address a few questions. Carol, I see your hand going up. Please go ahead.
Yes. There's any, have you had any of these TPO questions in the real test? Because I kind of think I've just taken TOEFL once, but I think this question number 1 on the real test is much more complicated a little bit, and also it's about critical thinking. I think it's it's not more maybe in before or years ago it was do you prefer go hiking or you prefer go stay at home, but now I believe is more complicated than these TPO questions.
Let me address it. No, the independent question can vary. Sometimes you have long introduction questions where they give you a long intro, but the question is still, do you prefer this or this, or which one do you agree or disagree, or it's always a choice question. Now, the question that appeared in the exam 3 weeks ago was whether you prefer to take lessons in person or online. That's a pretty straightforward question. Sometimes the question can be more challenging, sure. Have I seen questions that appear in the TPOs in the real exam? Absolutely. Does that mean that you want to memorize all the questions? Please don't. There's no point in trying to memorize and guess the question that will appear in the exam. By the way, that brings me to one thing that I'm going to mention in a second, Carol. But no, the level of difficulty is pretty similar, to be honest with you. Sometimes the question just has a longer introduction to it, but the source of the question, the core of the question, is typically a choice question or do you agree or disagree with?
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I want I try to do as many as I can, just to have, because I have difficulty with brainstorming.
Oh yeah.
So I try to to see if I can get one of these in the real test. So I have
I mean,
those
the
ideas ready.
the chances of you getting the same question in the TOEFL exam are extremely slim, but you can get something similar. What I tell my students is, the more you practice this question, the more samples you have in your mind. And the idea is that whenever you address a question, you're not giving me an original answer. I want you to give me responses that you have done before, and you can just recycle the ideas. That's why you want to practice here, but you need to be evaluated in your practices. Because if not, you never know if you're having the right approach there. So keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Now, let's see. Right, no more questions about question one. That's weird. Typically, this is the question where most people have questions on. All right, if there are no more questions about this particular question, we'll move on to question number 2. Now, question 2 here. This question, guys, is a question that I absolutely expect all my students. If you worked with me before, if you are here and you've been my student, you know that this question I expect perfection. There is no reason why you do not want to get a perfect performance in this question. Absolutely perfect, a 4 out of 4. If you do that, the chances of you getting 26 or more are actually quite there. It's a tangible situation. It's a mathematical approach. You can't have an issue on 2 different questions and expect to get a good performance. So that's one thing to keep in mind. This question, let's cheat a little bit. Here we have the announcement from the reading section. Here we have the conversation. We're not going to play it. But the question says, the woman expresses her opinion of the university's plan. State her opinion and explain the reason she gives for holding that opinion. Let's imagine that here it says, briefly summarize the plan and then state her opinion and explain the reason she gives for holding that opinion. Now, is the question telling you to thoroughly, in detail, tell me what happened here? The question is not telling me to address the reading section. So for those of you who like to start the answer by saying, according to the reading, the university is announcing an energy saving plan, and that plan is to reduce the cost of the lighting system, and you're wasting time. The question is not asking you for that. Why are you doing that? Only do what the question tells you to do. So once again, if you address something here that is not being asked, that's on you. The question is not asking you to do it. So what do you have to do here? You have to tell me, you have to acknowledge the situation. So according to the reading, the university is planning, or the university is announcing an energy saving plan. That's the title. That's it. That's what I did in my exam. You guys saw I got 30 points. I did not mention a single word from the reading section. Only the title. What's happening? The university is announcing an energy saving plan. That's it. Then I go into the discussion. A couple of students are discussing this plan, and the lady in the conversation disagrees with this idea for the following reasons. And then I talked about the reasons why the lady disagrees. That is what the question wants. Hence, I'm doing what the question wants. If you try to do more, that's not helpful. If you try to do more, you're just wasting time that later on may affect you. So if you focus only on what you have to address, you can speak at this level. You don't have to speak much faster than this. You don't have to use complicated words. You just have to make sure that you are addressing the information well, and that you are addressing the question. This is very obvious in question 3. Question 3 here, we have the reading, sure. We have the topic, changing behavior. And here we have the example of, using the example of washing hands, which is not here, it's in the lecture, explain the concept of changing behavior. So most students begin this question by saying, changing behavior is defined as a process in which a person learns how to do certain things in a certain patterns and so on, blah, 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 blah. That's not what the question is asking you to do. If you do this, you are wasting time because you're telling me something that I'm not asking you. Imagine that I ask you, tell me your name. And you tell me, well, I'm a TOEFL student. I'm preparing for the TOEFL exam. I recently was watching a video by Mike online, and my name is Maria, for example. Everything you said beforehand, I didn't care for. The only thing that mattered was the content of the question. In this case, use the examples of what's mentioned in the lecture to illustrate this. How did I do it in the TOEFL exam? The professor explains the concept of changing behavior by giving us an example of washing hands. And then I illustrate the example that took place here, not here. Why do they give us this? So you have an understanding of what's happening. But do I have to use it? Not according to the question. So please start doing what ETS wants you to do. I don't want to hear you guys telling me, why, but my friend told me, another person told me. Sure, you are entitled to listen to whoever you want to. But unless you can tell me that person scored 30 points, once again, question whether or not you want to follow that idea. But I had a friend who mentioned the reading section scored 26. Yes, that friend also lost 4 points. Luckily, maybe they didn't lose more points there. But maybe you're losing those 4 points as well, plus something else somewhere else, and that's why you're not scoring 26. Do what the question tells you to do. Now, those of you who have your hands up, keep them up. I'll address the questions in a second. For question 4, just to speed up the process, guys. Question 4, there's no reading. Question 4 is always broken down into 2 parts. Your job is to tell me the 2 discussions given there. Once again, what I explain and what I teach in my lessons in the speaking section is how to manage time, how to pay attention to the time, how to use your notes effectively, and how to deliver exactly the answer, the type of response that ETS wants to hear. Now, in this question, for example, explain 2 ways of preventing food spoilage. The beginning of the answer would be, the professor explains 2 ways of preventing food spoilage and why they're effective by giving us the following examples. And then tell me the examples you heard here. Once you learn what ETS wants from you, trust me, it's not that impossible to get the points you need. But you must, absolutely must, understand what ETS wants from you. If you get to that situation, then you'll be able to address this effectively. Now, let's address a few questions here. I see some hands going up. Noor, go ahead, please. If you have a question, I'll address the question for the speaking section.
Okay, yeah, teacher. I have a question about, even though the question asked me, for example, the question number 2 asked me about the express the lady about this opinion. So should I mention the opinion first and then, for example, according to the reading, the university was suggested if it's from writing from someone, and then mention 2 points and then come. However, in the conversation, the woman totally disagrees for a couple of reasons.
But once again, the question is not telling you to state the points from the reading section. So I would not recommend that. I would recommend you to tell me what the issue is. For example, let's imagine the university is announcing changes in the cafeteria. So how do I begin my answer? According to the reading, the university is announcing changes in the cafeteria.
That's it.
Then a couple of students are discussing these changes, and the lady in the conversation is in favor with the changes for the following reasons. And then tell me the 2 reasons why the lady is agreeing with this idea.
Okay, my big problem is, for example, first of all, my score is always 22, 23. Since I try to speak slowly, I do not finish with time.
Right.
But if they speak naturally and faster, when I see the time, I have still have 20 seconds. I finish everything. What you didn't do in this case?
Well, I'm assuming that you're giving the answer like this. Your notes are here. You're looking at your notes. You're speaking the answer here. And then when you look up, you realize you have time remaining.
Right.
The solution to this is simple. Bring your notes to your face. Put your notes right here. That way I can see the notes right there and I can see the time right there. I don't want to have to do this. If I'm delivering my answer and I see the time, and let's say I'm done with half of the answers, right? And I still have 40 seconds, my reaction should be to slow down. Slow down the way you're speaking. There's one thing that I teach that is called the panic moment. It's the moment when you need to start panicking. For question number 1, the panic moment is 30 seconds. Once you have used 30 seconds of your time, you need to start realizing you only have 15 seconds remaining. You better be that second example at that moment. If you're not, you're going too slow. If you transition to the second example and you have more than 15 seconds, you're going too fast. Slow down.
Okay.
For questions 2, 3, and 4, the panic moment is 40 seconds. Once you have used 40 seconds of your time, that means you only have about 20 seconds remaining. You should be finishing with your answer. If that's question 1, if that's question 2, the last 20 seconds should be the second idea given by the lady. If it is the lecture in question 3, the last 20 seconds is the last message there. And if it is question 4, the last 20 seconds should be the second opinion given in the lecture.
Okay, so I have other questions. If they still have a time, even though, you know, in the exam, you don't know how because it's zone of stress, so difficult to manage the situation. So my question is, even though if they still have 7 seconds left, should I say, and that's how the woman expressed his opinion regarding
certainly. The conclusion is not a necessity in any of the speaking questions. But if you have more than 5 seconds, please give me a conclusion. Yeah.
Okay, so different teacher, they said you stop just quiet and that's it. Leave the time.
That's, I don't know where they got that idea from, but unfortunately, if you stop, for example, if I start speaking my answer, one thing that I would agree with any professor or any tutor that mentions this is you don't want to add anything that will be considered an incomplete statement or something that was not mentioned in the story. So that's problematic. But if you stop speaking and you have 7 seconds remaining, you got to keep in mind that the computer is recording for 7 seconds.
Still have time. Yeah.
It will continue to record, and the computer would realize for 7 seconds there was no content here.
Okay.
So that'll be used against you. That's why, once again, if you have 5 seconds or more, give me a conclusion. If you have less than 5 seconds, we can be quiet. But if it's more than that, it's a long time. If you think about it, for example, 7 seconds of quiet, imagine that I'm speaking to you and then all of a sudden.
Long time.
It's a long time to be quiet. So make sure to give a conclusion.
Okay. And try to shut the note.
Be aware of the time. Once again, what I teach with my students is that we have different cues, different sound cues, but it's important that when the time's coming up, you start realizing you need to get to the end. The time should never surprise you because it's right there on the screen. How it surprises you? If your attention, if your gaze is looking at the notes right here, then of course you're going to be speaking, reading this as quickly as possible, going about it. And then when you look up, you realize either because the time ended or because you have a lot of time remaining. So keep your eyes close to the time.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see, Maria, go ahead and proceed with your question.
For question number 3, when I'm answering the question, when I see the passage, I write the notes, like I write the topic and then the definition. So I start my answer like according to the reading, the topic is, and then definition. And then in the lecture, professor delves deeper into the subject and I just continue whatever that professor says. So it's not like we should, so you said that we should not add much about reading.
We should not add anything at all about the reading section in question 3. Once again, I got 30 points several times not addressing anything from the reading section.
Okay.
But let me be clear about this 1 second. Sorry to interrupt you. If you mention something from the reading, is that going to affect your grades? No, it will not affect you negatively, but it's affecting your time. So my concern is when students take 15, 20 seconds to define something, because you're taking 20 seconds from the actual answer. Basically, those first 15, 20 seconds, I don't care for. So it's not that you lose points because you addressed the reading section. It's that you lose points and maybe you don't have time to address what you have to. That's the issue. But go ahead, sorry, continue.
So we don't mention about reading at all, not even the topic, that what the reading is actually about?
If the question, once again, I start the question by addressing the question. So if the question tells me, for example, use the points in the lecture to illustrate the concept of inflation, the beginning of my answer is the professor illustrates the concept of inflation by giving us the following example. So I literally read the question back. My beginning always starts from the question.
Okay, because my speaking score isn't like bad. Last time I got 27, so I'm wondering maybe those 3 were because of this that I mentioned about reading a lot.
Not necessarily. Once again, as I said, if you're mentioning the reading section, you're not going to lose points for that, but you're losing time. So maybe the points you were losing, maybe because you didn't address the other questions correctly. One thing that is important to address, let me show you a little page that I use in my lessons that I think it's important for you guys to know it. This is a website that was cool before AI was cool. It's called Otter. Let me give you an example to address that question. That 27, for example, here's my Otter. See, if I start recording right now, everything that I say should be appearing on the screen right now. Let's imagine that I'm giving an answer for question number 3, and I start speaking very quickly, and I'm addressing a question like this, and I'm going very fast because time is running out, so I'm going very quickly. And then sometimes what happens, the computer may not be able to understand what I'm saying at the moment. See, in this case, the computer actually understood me most of the time. The problem if you speak quickly is that the computer needs to understand what's going on. The computer is going to record your answer and create sort of like a transcript, like it's happening right now here live. If you're speaking quickly and you're not pronouncing the words correctly, sometimes the computer will not be able to understand you well. And then when it goes back and try to address your answer, they may have issues with certain words. One word could change the entire sentence. So you have to be very careful to make sure that you are trying to appeal to the system that is evaluating you. That is the computer system and the human rater. Okay, that was one example, for example. So whenever you use this application, if you give an answer, for example, you can go back and see and read it out loud and see, hey, I didn't mean to say this. Maybe I didn't say moment, I say momentum, for example. So you can go back and realize the computer didn't understand me in these cases, or maybe I spoke that word incorrectly. You have to be aware of that because you do not want to, once again, give an answer that the computer cannot understand you. If that happens, that could be a problem. That could be the reason why maybe you didn't get 30 points there before.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Let's see, Mandeep, go ahead, please.
Hi, I just wanted to know, like in the independent speaking, do we need to paraphrase what they ask? Like, will that give us a better score?
In what regard, for example, if the question is, let's say, would you prefer to take once again, a lesson online or in person? You mean if you start the answer by saying, when it comes to this question, I do prefer to take the lesson online instead of the lesson at home, something like that?
Yeah. Anything, does that give us a better edge?
I mean, that's how I begin all my answers. I want to very specifically state to the evaluator, which is my position. So it's definitely the way that I break down question 1, I break it down into 3 steps. The first step is to state your opinion. Okay. So you can do so much more effectively. You can do it quickly and say, in my case, I think an online lesson will be better than an in-person lesson for the following reasons. You don't have to acknowledge the other one, but you need to tell me very clearly what is the position that we have in here.
Right, right. And how about the conclusion? Like in all the 4 speaking, is conclusion not mandatory or?
Nope. In this 30 points that I got, I did not use a conclusion in any of them.
Right, right. Like I'm always getting a consistent score of 27, but I would have boosted to 30 because like I find speaking good.
Good. I'm glad that you're pushing yourself up there. Most people would just be content with the 27. No, make sure to just address the question effectively. Once again, use proper details in question 1. That's typically where most points are taken away. And if you give the answer exactly, if you give the evaluator, sorry, exactly what the question is asking, you might get the points you need.
Yeah, because I'm using the the points in the text, like in the second also I'm giving that the university has made changes. This is because 1 and 2, and then I start. And even in the third one, I'm saying like the article describes social loafing, and it is defined as a process.
And as I mentioned, you're not losing points for addressing that. You're just wasting time. And you got to be careful if your pace is too fast. Maybe the human rater is not picking you up correctly. That could be reasons why the points may be taken away.
Right, right.
So if you focus only on what you have to do, you can actually speak a lot slower and make more sense to the actual, what's again, question.
Okay, okay. And do we need to take points from the example the professor is giving, I mean, illustrating it, or we need to just conclude it in our own language? What do you say is better?
What do you mean in your own language? You mean like?
I mean, whatever you got the gist of it, do you need to summarize it in your own way, or you just need to pick the points from the example?
Got you. I mean, either or will be fine. You can either paraphrase or quote the person, and that's going to be okay. The important thing when you paraphrase is make sure you're not adding something that was not stated there.
True.
Because if you add something that wasn't mentioned, that's going to be used against you.
Okay. Okay.
There we go. My pleasure. Now, Pharma, that's how you appear here on the screen. Go ahead and proceed with your question.
Yes, teacher, thank you so much. I have a question about how can I organize what I hear in the lecture? Also, how can I catch the important information?
Well, the organization typically comes in a chronological order. So if you're taking notes, whatever you write on top will be the first thing mentioned. And as you proceed, it goes down. So there isn't an idea of first or second. It's basically all about the chronological order of the activity. And as I mentioned in the listening section, this idea of trying to catch what's important, honestly, it's difficult to understand the important aspect here. Although in the speaking section is a lot easier, because we know that in the conversation, the important part in question number 2, for example, is the opinions that we are hearing about that individual person. Typically, you can tell which one is the one who's speaking the most. Pay attention to that, to those opinions. Always 2 opinions will be given. In question number 3, we know the professor is going to illustrate whatever we read. So the entire illustration is important. And in question number 4, we know that the lecture will be divided into 2 parts. So once we start realizing that division, that's the important part. For question 4, sometimes the introduction is a bit longer. I've seen question 4s where the introduction is like 1 minute or 30 seconds. That's essentially not important. But once you start realizing, for example, the 2 divisions of that activity, that's what matters. But my advice is, as always, in the listening section, in the speaking, and the writing section, pay attention to the topic, take your notes, and use whatever is useful for you. But don't worry about what's important and what's not. Assume that everything is important.
Thank you.
There we go. Fatim, go ahead. I see your hand going up.
I have a question about question number 3 in speaking.
Go ahead.
It just, we need to say this. I'm gonna just say it and see if this is the right way to say.
Go for it.
In the lecture, the professor provide an example to illustrate the concept of a cleaning behavior, which is, and then I start to speak.
Well, if you describe chaining behavior, for example, once again, the question is not telling you to describe chaining behavior. So if you want to do it, once again, you're not going to lose points for doing that, but you're wasting time doing something I'm not asking you to do. So you may
So
want
this is the way how to speak, the start speaking. I don't need to say anything in the paragraph.
Once again, as I said before, I never address the content of the reading section, and my performances typically stay between 30 and 29 points.
If you don't mind, can you just give me the way how you say it so I can write it down so I can just
as I mentioned, let me show you here by share the screen. So if I'm addressing this question, I would start from here. The professor explains the concept of chaining behavior by giving us an example of how he taught his daughter to wash her hands. And then I would illustrate the example here. Of course, I would have to listen to this thing, but basically I start my answer from here. Same goes here. The professor explained 2 ways of preventing food spoilage and why they're effective by giving us the following example. This case, I'm not even paraphrasing it. I'm reading that out loud. And the reason why I start from the question is because I don't want to get stuck at the beginning. I don't want to go, well, the professor is talking about food and spoilage and how it is effective to prevent. I don't want to struggle at the beginning. Literally read the question. All the words there. I often hear students tell me, or even fellow tutors say, if you read the question, you lose points. Okay. Then how can you explain my 30s? Most of the time, and this is not a diss or a jab at anybody, but most of the time, friends, test takers, and even tutors mention comments about the TOEFL exam that are just opinions. See, I don't like to give my opinion about the TOEFL exam. I like to state facts. Because I can tell you my opinion here, but the important thing is focus on what the question wants you to do and use the question as your platform.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Noor, go ahead.
Yeah, this is my first time to know exactly, because in my exam, I just totally go ahead, do the reading section and then the listening, I repeat an answer, but I didn't see the questions. So this is my first time to know what I have to read the question first.
It happens quite often. Many students admit to me and tell me, I never read that question, actually. I'm like, go ahead.
I start direct.
In fact, that's going to be very surprising in the next topic in the writing section, which we're going to get to in a second. There's 2 more questions here. Sonny, go ahead. I see your hand going up.
Yeah, I wanted to mention the same thing about the speaking. The first time I took the exam, I didn't prepare well. I just wanted to check what my speaking is and like how much I score. So I just answered what the questions were, and I didn't realize what format I used or anything. I got 25, but then I studied for 3 weeks and then reappeared, and I did what the ETS wanted me to, like read, summarize the passage, and then do my like summarize the lecturer, right? And my score dropped to 24, and
Yeah.
I'm like wondering, like, should I stop studying or what should I do?
No,
And now I
actually,
realize I can relate it. That how come that happened?
you know, it happens quite often. Many students have the same experience. They tell me, you know, my first test, when I knew nothing about the TOEFL exam, I actually did better. And sometimes it has to be connected with, of course, the stress associated with the exam. You know, when you take the test again, then you are a lot more cautious and self-aware of the exam, of failing, of not getting the grades you need to. So that also affects you. But once again, the secret, if you can call it that, about how to get 120 or how I've gotten these performances before, honestly, guys, it's no magic formula. It's not a secret template. It's not a particular word that I use. It's just make sure that you really address those questions. Like really focus on giving them what they want. In fact, you'll be surprised with the writing section in a second. And you'll see how this applies to the integrated writing section too. Now, a few more questions, then we'll move on. Once again, sorry for taking so long. I appreciate you guys staying here all this time. Let's continue on with, we have a couple more questions here. Miriam and Nilofar, and we're done with the speaking questions. Miriam, go ahead, please.
Hi, Mike, how are you?
Doing well.
Good. My question about question 1. So when I start my answer, like I would prefer take online classes, for example. Should I mention because I have 2 reasons, or just start my answer right away?
That's not a problem if you mention because I have a couple of reasons, or for the following reasons, or for 2 reasons. That's perfectly fine. The important thing is make sure to give me 2 reasons. Like if you tell me, you know, I feel this way for a couple of reasons and you only give me 1, I'm going to ask you, what about the other one? So,
okay.
So typically I like to say for the following reasons. That way it gives me room to mention 2 with no problem.
And how can we get the reasons? How can we get the brainstorm?
That's the part that I normally address independently. But to give you an idea, there are ways to react to these questions. You don't want to think about these questions. You want to react. You always want to ask yourself honest questions. So if you think about it, for example, one category that I mentioned before is the category of money. I like using money as an example because it's very easy to show. And imagine that I were to say, I prefer to take lessons online because they're cheaper than in-person classes. Now, that's a statement. That's not the detail. The detail that I need here is just to mention how much. So if I were to say, I prefer to take lessons online for the following reasons, the first one being is that these lessons are more affordable. And then I would give the illustration and I would say, for instance, an online lesson would cost me only about $40 per lesson, but an in-person lesson actually would cost me $60 per lesson. So it's actually cheaper to take lessons online. That would be the first statement and the first illustration.
So do you think if we put the contrast between two reasons, that's mean that online is cheaper, it's better?
It's not so much the contrast, it's the fact that I illustrated the amount of what I consider cheaper. If you only tell me it's cheaper, I have no idea what you mean. Your concept of cheaper may be very different from mine. So you have to be detailed. That's the thing that most students don't do. So if you're not detailed about those answers, you're not going to get full points there. Now, Nilofar, go ahead.
Sounds good. Thank you.
My pleasure. Nilofar, go ahead, please.
I have 2 questions actually. In question number 3, sometimes the professor mentions an example of his own or her own self while he was a child.
Sure.
And when addressing or explaining his example, I sometimes face challenges in exchanging the tenses. For example, if the professor used the simple past, is it necessary that I should use the simple perfect tense while indirectly quoting the professor explaining his example? And also sometimes when I listen to the audio scripts, I don't know the exact pronunciation of a word, or I sometimes cannot spell that word while I'm writing, and I face challenges. In those situations, do I need to take the risk of writing incorrect spelling, or correct or pronounce that incorrectly, or just, for example, if that word is a protein, I say a kind of protein, or if that word is the name of an animal, I just mention a kind of animal?
Well, let me tell you. First, when it comes to the first part of your question here, which is how to quote the professor. either the simple past or the simple present will do. You can either do the quote speech or the reported speech, whichever one is simpler for you. You can mention the professor mentions, he says, he talks about, he states, just keep it in the present. Or you can just do it in the simple past. Just stick to one of them. Typically, the simple past is easier for me, although once again, there's no preference between one or the other. And regarding the second part of the question, which in this case is what happens if you're listening to something and you phonetically write what you think it's how it's written, but it's not spelled correctly. Your notes are meant for you and you only. So you can even write your notes in your native language if you want to. The important thing is that you can then, state what happened. If you mispronounce a proper noun, such as the name, even the name of an animal, which is not a proper noun, keep in mind the computer system has a word bank that is sort of like pre-installed in this question. So if the question deals, to give you an example, with the animal called the porcupine, if you mispronounce that word and call it porcupine, for example, the computer is very likely to understand what you're trying to say, because that is part of the word bank in that particular question. So proper names are not going to be a significant issue. Just do your best, and of course try to pronounce it as quickly as closely as what you heard, but don't be overly stressed about that situation.
Okay, thank you.
There we go. Now, I think I have one more person here. Shukrula, go ahead, please. We'll finish up with this one and we'll get into the writing section. Shukrula, I cannot hear you. Let me stop you there. I don't know if you guys could hear that well, but I hear like a background robotic sound. I can barely hear that. If you don't mind.
Okay.
There we go. Now I can hear you.
Hear me?
Yep, now I can hear you. Go ahead.
Now, can you hear me?
Yep, hear you perfectly. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a questions. Can you tell me all template in speaking sections, question 1, 2, 3, 4, and...
Well, as I mentioned before, I don't use a template for these questions. And as I've been stating over the information here, there are patterns that we follow here, but I already mentioned how to do that. For question 1 and 2, for question 1, you want to state your opinions. 1 second here, let me mute you because there's some feedback there. Now, for question 1, as I mentioned before, you want to address the question, given 2 statements and 2 illustrations. For question number 2, you want to, there we go, your audio is giving me feedback. You want to address the opinion given by the lady. For question 3, you want to state whatever the professor said. And question 4, just break down the 2 examples. But instead of giving you a template, as I mentioned, once I upload this video, I'm going to list samples of my responses so you can hear how I address these questions. So you can see the way that I'm going over these questions. There we go. Now let's go on to the writing section. If not, we're not going to finish today, guys. Once again, all the other questions, as I mentioned before, make sure to click on the link that I shared before, which is my Facebook profile. Ask me the questions directly, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Now, going on to the question, the writing section. The writing section is honestly becoming my favorite section so far. In the writing section, I can speak to you very much with authority because in the past, I think 5 or 6 years, in every single test that I've taken, every single real TOEFL test, I'm getting 30 points. So I can tell you very much so that my strategies that I'm using here are very optimal. In fact, when the new question came up, I was very excited to test myself here, and I'm happy to see that I got a 30 again. Now, let me start from the integrated section, and then we're going to transition to the new question. After that, I'm going to leave some questions open, but since we've been here for now 2 hours, once again, I appreciate you guys are still here. Many of you have already dropped out considering the time, but we're going to try to close it up there. Now, let's take a look at what happened in the exam. The integrated writing section was exactly the same as what you see in a TPO activity. Exactly the same. Nothing extraordinary there, nothing that was more complicated or less complicated. The same old question that we normally get. Now, the way that I address this question is slightly different from what most people do. the vast majority of you are probably using templates here. Guys, I always say this. If you're taking the TOEFL exam, you're not taking this for fun. There is a reason why you're taking the TOEFL test. I invite you, I welcome the idea of using a template. But if you've used that template several times in the exam and you haven't gotten to where you need to be, please stop using templates. Templates are great tools to show you how to start writing. But if you go to the exam blindly, just, I'm going to type the same template I always do and hope for the best, guys, you may not improve your performance. And for the writing section in question number 1, your template may be slightly off. Let me show you. Here we have an example of an integrated writing section. Of course, this is not the same one that I had in the exam, but it's an integrated nonetheless. This section always remains the same. We always expect 4 paragraphs, 1 introductory paragraph, and then 3 paragraphs stating individual specific ideas about what's being mentioned here. Now let's cheat for a little bit. Of course, we know we have to listen to the lecture right after that, and the lecture typically disagrees with the reading. So whatever statements are mentioned here, the lecture is going to be the opposite way. No surprise there. Now, let's take a look at the question out loud. Summarize the points made in the lecture, being sure to explain how they cast down specific solutions proposed in the reading passage. For the past 2 hours, I've been telling you that please listen to ETS and listen to the questions. I would give up my left arm right now that the vast majority of you start addressing this essay by telling me the reading mentioned this, however, the lecture mentioned this. If you start from the reading, are you really doing what the question tells you to do? Because the question is telling you, summarize the points made in the lecture. So if you begin your writing by summarizing the points made in the reading, you are not doing what the question wants you to do. And I already established before in the speaking section that if you're not following the questions, you should not expect to get a perfect performance. So how do I begin my activity? Once again, I'm going to leave you some samples of this so you can see and evaluate for yourself. But I start addressing the lecture first. Not because it's easier, it's not, honestly. And I agree with you, the reading section should be the first part. But the question is specifically telling me to start from the lecture. So I shouldn't question ETS's directions. I would follow what they ask and I would start summarizing the lecture first. And then I will proceed to address the content in the reading section. This is what you must do if you want to get the points in this section. If you're not doing that, let me give you an example here. If you're not following those ideas, then unfortunately, you cannot expect to get the points in this section. Let me give you an example here. This is an example that I put together a while back. This is TPO 20. Now, notice that I start with what is called an opening statement. I'm going to show you this example in the chat and in the Facebook groups. Don't worry. This is going to be attached to that activity. Notice that in this paragraph, for example, I illustrate the opening statement. So basically, what is the paragraph about? But then I illustrate the lecturer's opinion. Then I give one transition word, and then I mention the reading's opinion. I do not start from the reading. I never start from the reading section. The reason why I never start from the reading section is because the question is not telling me to do that. I invite you to check any integrated question, and you would never find a question telling you, summarize the reading section and then tell me how the lecture contradicts it. That is not how it goes. So once again, please start doing what ETS tells you to do. And this is not me coming up with this idea out of my imagination. Once again, what I'm telling you here are TOEFL facts. You want to check the TOEFL exam? This is the new writing rubric, the integrated writing and writing for the academic discussion. You want to get a 5? Like I did, I got 30 points. Successfully select the important information from the lecture. This is how you begin. And coherently, the right order, and accurately, the right content, then present the info in comparison to the one in the reading. Lecture first, reading second. That's not me saying it, that's ETS. So, For those of you who are starting this activity from the reading section, this may be a reason why you're losing points, because you're not doing what they're telling you to do. If this is the first time you hear this, welcome. This is something that most people don't know. But if you make these changes, you are going to do whatever ETS wants you to do. Now, is it possible to listen to the listening section first? I had a question here. No, you first will read the reading section. Once again, I understand that this makes no sense, because first you read and then you listen. Many students tell me, Mike, but the listening section is reacting to the reading. Yes, I know. So how do you do it? Well, you start with an opening statement. What is the problem? What is the discussion here? Let's imagine. The discussion is, once again, let's talk about the idea of online lessons. Let's imagine the reading tells you 3 positive things. They're cheap, the cost, the technology, and the professors, let's imagine. And let's say the lecturer actually disagrees with that idea and say, well, the online lesson is really not that cheap. If you think about it, because you have to own a computer, you have to have your microphones, you have to pay for the internet. So when you add all this up, it's actually not that cheap. So how would you start that paragraph? The first discussion revolves around the cost of an online lesson, period. The professor states that online lessons are actually not that cheap, and you mentioned the reasons why. However, the reading highlights that online lessons are cheaper than in-person lessons because the overall cost of the lesson is typically $10 less than in-person lessons. Let's imagine that's the idea. That's how you do it. Basically, you state the situation first, and then you acknowledge the lecture. Once again, I know this is a lot. Many of you have only heard this for the past 30 seconds. I'm going to leave you a sample of my essay so you can see how I do it. But once again, there's no secret here, guys. Do what ETS tells you to do, and you'd be surprised how many points you get. Now, let me address the new question, which is the question that I'm really, really excited about, and hopefully you are as well. By the way, I'm getting already messages on Facebook from you guys. Please keep that going. If you have questions, send me the messages there. One more time, I may take a while to reply to you. I apologize right now. But once I get to your message, rest assured that it'll be me responding back to you. Now, let me open up the new type of question here. Let me close this up. And show you this question. Now, for this question, I'm actually going to do one live here with you guys. I love doing this question live because it can show you how to get a 4 or a 5. I'm not making any promises. Sometimes I get a 4, sometimes I get a 5. But I want to show you one here. This is the link that ETS is offering us. You have here practice tests you can buy. You have some free practice tests. You have some practice tests that you can take a look at. And then here you have 28 questions. One more time, if you've never seen this before, I'm going to leave the link for this. Don't worry. Now, we have 28 questions, guys. Let's have some fun. Pick a number, any number. The 10th number that I see on the chat, I'm going to do that activity. So start putting in the chat the actual numbers that you want to see there. Once again, suggest a number, and the 10th one, I'll do it. So it's 1, 15, keep them up, 15, 4, 9, 11, 7, 18, 15, and 9. Okay, so 9, 1. Let's do number 9. First, I'm going to explain to you how the question looks like for those of you who've never seen the question before, and then I'm going to actively address the question. Okay, so this question is divided into 4 parts. The instruction here, the information given by the professor, the 2 opinions given by the students, and then your ability to write. I'm going to do this very quickly. Now, I'm going to probably repeat this because if I'm going to explain it to you, then it's going to take away my time. Just like in the exam, the second that you get this question, the time starts running, guys. From the moment you see the question, the 10 minutes start going down. So you don't really have 10 minutes to write. You have more like 7 minutes because you got to dedicate time to read this. Now, in this case, once again, I'm going to do this with all of you here. No pressure. That's 66 people watching plus all the other ones that are going to watch later. And let's take a look at it. I'm going to start with reading this content. Your professor is teaching a class on environmental science. That's important to know. What is the lesson about? I have to express and support my opinion, which I'm going to do in a second, and make a contribution, which means that I'm not just going to copy whatever they said. Let's take a look at the information here. It says, this week we've discussed how carbon dioxide released by gasoline-powered or petrol-powered cars pollutes the air and contributes to climate change. Okay, so this is the information so far. We're talking about climate change and how cars may pollute the environment. Here we continue. Let's focus now on two proposals that governments can consider as they try to reduce carbon dioxide emissions from cars. One proposal is to improve and expand public transportation.
We can see.
Oh wait, my apologies. I'm not sharing the screen. Oh, thank you for bringing that up. My apologies. You see, after 2 hours here, I'm losing track of what I'm doing. Thank you for that. Okay, so sorry. Let's go back to this idea again. My apologies. Here on the top, you have the instructions of the questions. As I mentioned before, it is a class on environmental science. As I mentioned also here, you have to support your opinion and make a contribution to that opinion. Now, here we have what the professor is saying. In the real exam, it appears just like this, guys. Sometimes even the same characters. Now, the doctor is saying the following. This week, once again, I'm going to read it out loud again. This week, we've discussed how carbon dioxide released by gasoline-powered or petrol-powered, that means cars that use gas, pollutes the air and contribute to climate change. It's important to understand the whole question. She continues by saying, let's focus now on two proposals that governments can consider as they try to reduce carbon dioxide emissions from cars. So it's governments proposing things that would help reduce the carbon dioxide emissions from cars. Now, one proposal is to improve and expand public transportation. The other is to provide financial support to companies that make electric cars to consumers and to consumers who buy them. Which proposal do you think is better? Now, before, at this moment, you could immediately start writing content. In the previous independent question, you could start right away from this activity. However, now that's not so much the case anymore. Now you have to read the other opinions there before you proceed to type anything. So let's see how well we can go on to this situation. Now, let's see, 1 second there. All right. So let's go into the information here. Claire says, I think improving public transportation will be more beneficial overall than giving tax breaks or rebates to particular companies and consumers. So Claire is in the idea of improving public transportation. If taking a train or a bus is significantly easier, cheaper, and faster than driving a car, more people will want to use public transportation with fewer cars on the road. There will be less air pollution. Okay, so that's what she's saying about this whole thing. Now, Paul says, I believe that providing financial support to electric car manufacturers and consumers is the better, innovative, long-term strategy. Many people live in rural areas and they need their own vehicles to get around. These people would not benefit from, say, more train lines being built in far-off cities. So Paul is in the idea of, let's provide financial support to manufacturers and consumers. Now, my opinion would literally be one of the two. Like, I have to either agree with providing financial benefits for companies and consumers or just improving public transportation. Now, considering that I have 5 minutes remaining, because I've explained this out loud, I'm going to close this up and do it again, meaning I'm going to restart my time and from the beginning, start typing the content. I should be able to type this and have at least 3 minutes remaining. Once again, that should be the norm, because even though I'm going to restart this time, I should not take 10 minutes to write this essay. Because in the real exam, you do not have 10 minutes to write the essay. You normally have around 7 minutes. So let's close this up and let's open it up again. And I'm going to do this live for you guys. Once again, just to show you how to do this. This is going to be my live gift for you. Put this right here. Okay, so same question. I'm going to begin the following way. In the real exam, this is what I did. First and foremost, I break down my answer into parts. Now, I'm going to later on in my courses specify how to address these parts more specifically, but I want to show you how the parts operate. In the first part, I want to state my position and acknowledge, where I stand in this idea. So I begin by doing something like this. My position on this argument is similar to Paul's opinion. Okay, I agree with Paul in the idea of getting financial support. So I mentioned I also believe that the best course of action to reduce, it's important to make sure that you understand the full question. We're talking about reducing the negative effects of cars polluting the environment. So to reduce the negative effects of cars polluting the environment, in this case, is to have the government, so it's a long statement here, have the government provide financial support to car companies and, let's say, buyers. Maybe we could talk about the people who, let's see, and those who wish to buy cars. Okay. Now it's a long statement here because the question is rather long. Now I want to introduce my main opinion. So in this case, I would say something like this: offering a financial incentive to companies who build electric cars and consumers want to acquire these vehicles will push people away from buying gas-powered vehicles. Once again, I'm getting these words from here, just in case you wonder. That's my main idea. Now, let's illustrate the example, because I need to illustrate my point of view here. So I mentioned here, for instance, okay, now I want to exemplify the example. Hopefully you guys are still here. By the way, sorry for making this so long. So in this case, for instance, let's take a look at the overall idea. If the government were to offer a 20%, let's say, tax break for the companies who build electric cars, these companies will be more motivated to switch their production to these environmental friendly vehicles. All right, I would say the same. The same could be said about consumers. If a person who wants to buy, a car choose between let's imagine a $20,000 car, gas-powered car, or a $15,000 car, electric car of the same model, they are likely to choose the cheaper model. Now I'm going to finish it up here. Buying an electric car will reduce the carbon dioxide emissions. So, conclusion here in the end, if the government, once again, I'm going to repeat the whole question again. If the government were to offer tax breaks to car companies and consumers, would like to buy electric cars, the problem of pollution will be greatly reduced. All right, now I'm done with this information. Now that I'm done with this, I'm going to make this into a single paragraph. I'm going to read it quickly. I'm officially done with it. If the time runs out right now, I don't mind because my content is done. Even if I have grammatical mistakes or misspelling words, that shouldn't be a significant issue. Now, it is a long one, 188 words. But notice that, once again, I finished with still more than 3 minutes remaining. So even if I started this at the 7th minute, I would have had enough time to do this. Now, if you cannot type that quickly, I recommend you to start practicing your typing speed. But even if I do this in 100 words, which I have an example for that, I got 4 points in the 100 words here. Now, let's take a look at this together, and then we'll switch it up. My position on this argument is similar to Paul's opinion. I also believe that the best course of action to reduce the negative effects of cars polluting the environment is to have, once again, if the time runs out here, it's relevant, the government provide financial support to car companies and those who wish, and those people, those individuals who wish to buy cars. Wish to buy electric cars. Let's specify that it's not just any vehicles. Electric cars. Offering a financial incentive to companies who build electric cars and consumers who want to acquire, that's kind of redundant. Acquire these vehicles will push people away from buying gas-powered vehicles. For instance, if the government were to offer a 20% tax break for the companies who build electric cars, these companies will be more motivated to switch their production to these environmentally friendly vehicles. The same could be said about consumers. If a person who wants to buy a car has to choose between a $20,000 gas-powered car or a $15,000 electric car of the same model, they are likely to choose a cheaper model. Buying an electric car will reduce carbon dioxide emissions. In the end, if the government were to offer tax breaks to car companies and consumers who like to buy electric cars, the problem of pollution will be greatly reduced. Okay. Now I'm going to take a few pictures of this because I want to send you this at the end of our discussion so you can see this in the post. I'm taking a screenshot of this, I'm putting it on Photoshop, and I'm done. So at this point, there's still a minute remaining. Hopefully you guys are still here with me. Sorry for speaking to myself here for the past 10 minutes. Let's move next and see what happens. I expect here either a 4 or a 5. Let's see what the computer gives me. Let's see. It's calculating it, and it gave me a 5. Why a 5? Mainly speaking, because I was very detailed about the reasons there. Notice that I didn't just say the car would be cheaper. I highlighted how cheap it would be. Notice that I highlighted, once again, that companies will be more motivated to make these cars because they're getting a 20% break. In all of the examples that I put together, normally, when I do between 150 and 180 words, it's more likely to get a 5 there. But if I only were to write only 100 words, what happens when I write 100 words? I'm not going to do it again, trust me. But when I do 100 words, I have gotten 4 points. I will give you an example once again, in the class report, I will give you an example of the 4 there. But this is to show you, once again, it's the second time that I've done this live on videos, and both times I've gotten 5s. This is why I can get 30 points in the real exam. But I want to be clear about something. Does that mean that you have to write 180 words to get 5 points? Not exactly. Okay. This is like the independent speaking section, guys. You just have to be very detailed about the ideas you're mentioning. And most importantly, you have to address the question. This is not just about a tax break for cars. It's because those cars were polluting. So don't forget to add the information of pollution there. So once again, if you address the information like this, as you just now saw, you can get a 5. The first module, the first week of the course that I'm putting together, it's all about the writing section. And I'm going to show you not only how to get that 5 like I did there, but how to always have the same pattern, the same performance, the same activities, and how to get a 5 in this question all the time. For those of you who need 24 in the writing section, guys, if you get a 5 out of 5 here, you can have an average integrated and still may get a 24. And if you change your integrated, like I mentioned at the beginning, to address the lecture first, you can easily get more than 24 points. So once again, let's address a few questions here, guys. Now we're near the end. Thank you for being here all this time. This is the longest video I've put together ever. Normally it's 2 hours. I apologize for the lateness here. Trust me, it's late here as well. Now, let's take a look at the questions here. We'll do just a few, not to take so much time here. Hakuna, go ahead, please.
Hi, Mike. Thank you for doing this. My question is, to get a high score, should we put some grammatical structure like if clause or transition word in writing?
It's not that you need them. I want to be perfectly clear about it. It's not that you need them to get good points. It's that if the response requires them, then yes, you should have them. But I don't want you to think about this is not a let's say a formula that you have to include 3 conditionals, 2 tenses, 5. This doesn't work that way. Now, if you were to need to use an if conditional, hopefully you know how to use it well. If you want to state something that happened in the past, hopefully you can illustrate that using past tenses. Okay, but it's basically that idea. If the requirement exists, hopefully you can do it correctly.
And how about conclusion?
The conclusion?
Yeah.
Well, whenever I do only 100 words, because I show my students what happens if you do only 100 words. Because sometimes students, it's a very fair question. Mike, what if I cannot write 188 words? Okay, let's do 100, the bare minimum. In the bare minimum, I don't use a conclusion. There's no space for me to write one. But in those conclusions, I get 4 points. I would show you guys in the report that I'm going to put in the Facebook groups, this picture with a 5 and the one that I get a 4 with 100 words. And you can see, of course, they're different, but you'll see that you can certainly do that. And if you get a 4 in the integrated and a 4 in the academic discussion question, you get 24 points. So,
and one other question. You generally put example like in numerical order, like sometimes you put 20% off or sometimes, Is that necessary to put example like that, or like we can use just like general example?
It's not necessary, but once again, the more specific you are, the fewer questions they'll have. So instead of just saying the buyer would choose a cheaper vehicle, notice that I mentioned what is cheaper. So in that case, the evaluator won't have to think what is my definition of cheaper, because cheaper is literally 1 cent less. See, $99.99 is cheaper than $100, but it's just cheaper by 1 cent. So what I'm doing here is I'm specifically highlighting what is the definition of a cheaper vehicle. If you give them, once again, those detailed activities, then it'll be really good.
Okay, I got it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Farma, go ahead and proceed with your question. Go ahead. To address one question that is appearing here while Farma unmutes your microphone, if you get 4 in both writing sections, you get 24 points. Now, I think Farma, we're having an issue with the microphone. Carol, go ahead and please proceed in the meantime.
Yes, Professor, I was gonna ask you, what is a good, I have 3 questions though. What is one good source to practice grammar? The second one is if you can explain what is that raw score that I've been reading in the TOEFL group, that is that how ETS score their integrated task. And the other question is if you can maybe show us, not live, but if you can post an example of your integrated writing, because seriously is the first time, and I've been studying TOEFL for a long time, that I hear about not addressing
The reading section first,
the
yes.
reading first.
It's a fair reaction. I always get the same reaction with my students. And they're like, really, Mike? I'm like, well, the points speak for themselves.
Yeah, I'm like,
but let me start from the ending. Yes, I will be posting, just to let you guys know. In the report, this video is going to end in a few minutes, because once again, I've taken so much time here from you guys. And I appreciate you listening actively. We started with almost 100, there's 56 here, so half of the students dropped. Once again, it's late. I'm currently in Argentina, so right now it's like 33 minutes past midnight. So it's quite late here too. But going back to the situations, I'm going to post in the individual Facebook groups. I would leave a link at the end of, once again, my groups and where to contact me. Guys, if you need help, reach out. The questions, the questions have no fees. You can ask me as many questions as you want to, and I'll try my best to reply to them. If you want to be a part of my private groups, yes, of course, there's a fee associated to that, but I normally don't discuss that in groups like this. If you want that information, I'll give it to you. But to go back into the information that I'm going to post samples of my speakings, me delivering the answers, samples of the writing, integrated, and the new writing academic discussion question. So you can see what I'm doing here. And you're more than welcome to look at that and imitate and be inspired by that as much as you need to. That is going to be in the groups. It's going to be posted there. You can see it live. Now, regarding the grammar question, where can you practice grammar? Now, grammar is a matter of pattern and repetition. When students, nowadays, everywhere you write, whether it is Google Documents, whether it is let's say Grammarly, Quillbot, they always correct your grammar. So sometimes it's difficult for you to make self-corrections because the computers keep correcting you on your own. Whenever you make a grammatical mistake, don't just correct it. My advice is write it down and ask yourself, okay, what was the mistake here? Is it a misspelling word? Is it the fact that I didn't conjugate the verb? And at the end of the day, constantly check yourself and say, okay, today I made 4 mistakes in the writing. Next day, I'm going to try to avoid those mistakes. It's a matter of self-correction. It's really annoying and it takes time, but this is the best way to make improvements. I can tell you, read all these grammar books. For me, the most useful grammatical book is one called Betty Hazard. It's a blue book. It's a great grammatical book. I use that book to teach my kids, for example, because my kids, they speak my language, English, because they hear me at home. But we live in a foreign country, so they don't necessarily write that well. So I taught them using this book, and it's quite helpful. But in the TOEFL exam, grammar is not something that is, let's say, essential. It's important to write well, yes, but most importantly is make sure that your message is clear. You can make grammatical mistakes and still get a perfect 5. So practice by trial and error. When you see a mistake, highlight it and ask yourself, how can I improve this? Why can I do this better? And make yourself sort of like a mental note, write it down, have a little TOEFL journal, and try to avoid these mistakes as much as possible. That could be a good idea. Did I miss any question there? I think
okay. Thank you. No, just only about the raw score.
Oh yes, the raw score. Good. Now, the TOEFL exam evaluates your performances out of 30 points, but the evaluation points actually in the writing section go from 0 to 5. So of course, if you get 2 5s, that's equivalent to 10. That's not equivalent to 30. So what you want to do is just basically do a simple conversion. For example, if you get a 4 out of 5, let me do it. My math is horrible. I'm a good TOEFL tutor. I'm a horrible math. I'm horrible at math, sorry. So if I get a 4 out of 5, for example, that means there's an 80%. So simply take 80% of 30 points, and that's the performance you'll get. 80% of 30 is 24 points. That's why if you get 4 on both, you get 24 points. Now, if you get a 4.5 or 4.7, then that increases or decreases the performance. But typically, once again, if you want to be above 24 points, you want to get 4 at least on both of them.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Professor. I appreciate you did this for us.
My pleasure. Now, Arlene, go ahead. I see your hand going up.
Yes, last example you gave the writing like how do you say it? The university did a study, blah blah blah. Does it have to be a fact, or can
No.
it be like a?
It's just what you want to do there, Lynn, is just make sure that whatever illustration you're using is clear. You don't want to be vague about your illustrations. If you tell me, for example, to give you an idea, I think it's important to give you an example, to promote public transportation, the other area of that answer, of that question, because it would help people. But it would help people how? Well, people can ride the bus and that would prevent pollution. How? Well, imagine the idea, if 20 people, instead of driving their own individual vehicles, they take the bus, that means there are 20 cars that are not polluting the road at that moment. So if people decide to take the bus, there will be less pollution in the air. Now that's specific. That's what you want to do. You don't have to give a scientific example, but whatever example you give me, you have to make sure it's very clear. If it's not that clear, I'm going to pretend that I don't get it. So that's why you want to be very specific about these things. The more specific you are, the fewer questions the computer would have. So keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
My pleasure. Now, Miriam, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Yes, my question about the integrated essay. So we should start with the opening statement.
Indeed. Yeah, you want to.
It's important.
Honestly, I once again, in all of the examples that I've done, I start from the opening statement. So I do think it's something that should be done that way, because if you only tell me, for example, the lecturer disagrees with the idea, then I'm going to ask you what idea. But if you tell me, for example, let's imagine it's about car pollution again, and you tell me, the first discussion is about whether electric cars actually help the environment, and then you tell me the professor does not think that electric cars help the environment, then that opening statement is like a platform. You see, when students tell me, how can we start from the lecture if the lecture actually reacts to the reading? Well, we need a platform for the lecture, and the platform is that opening statement. So if you tell me what is a discussion first, then you can tell me the lecturer agrees or disagrees. But if you start directly from the lecture, sometimes it feels kind of like floating in the air, like where is this coming from? So I really recommend that opening statement. And if you think about it, it's just one extra sentence. So it shouldn't take that long.
What do you think if we started like the lecture and the reading
Both
discuss, yeah, without opening statement?
Once again, that's the first paragraph. Can you do the introductory paragraph without the opening statement? I mean, grammatically speaking, yes, you can. But
what about the other three?
Exactly. But do I recommend that in the body paragraph? Not so much. Because you want to tell me in the body paragraph, what is the discussion we're seeing here? And one important thing, I forgot to mention this, guys. Please don't be repetitive. Don't tell me the professor, or the reading. Change your subjects. In the example that I'm going to show you, you're going to see that I never repeat those subjects. So use the example that I'm going to give you to get some ideas.
Okay, and what's the best? We have to choose the simple tense or past.
As I mentioned, either or could work perfectly. Just stick to whatever one. Stick to one. Like, don't tell me past, present, past, present, past, present. Stick to one and continue that way. That would not be a significant issue.
Okay.
Now, unless the question is specifically about prehistoric animals about the past, then yeah, please
dinosaur.
Keep it in there. Keep it in the past. There we go.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Pharma, go ahead. I can't seem to hear you, Pharma. Nope. If you're speaking at the moment, unfortunately, I cannot hear you. If that continues, please, I invite you to write the question in the chat and I'll address the question. In the meantime, Maria, please go ahead.
Hello. Well, thank you. I want to ask about that is it possible to listen the lectures first and then watch the reading. Doesn't affect the time that? Because in my mind it's like first you can see the reading and then listen.
Yes, that's how it goes. In the real exam, you first read for 3 minutes, then the reading disappears momentarily. It'll appear back when you're writing, and then you listen to the lecture. So the lecture comes second, yes.
But this one You say that first is better to listen the lecture, yes?
Not to listen to the lecture. When you write
Ah,
the essay, you must address the lecture first. But the lecture always appears after the reading when it comes to giving you the content. First you read and then you listen to it.
okay, no, just is the start to writing with
Exactly.
the.
When writing, address the lecture first.
Okay, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Basil, go ahead.
Hello, Mike. Sorry to bother you.
No,
I have
not
two
at all.
questions, please.
Go ahead.
The first one, can we deal with this new task like as the old one, but less words? Like I feel actually there is no difference, and then we have to give a reason, idea, then like more detail.
You mean the new academic writing section?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like the independent question, but instead of doing 4 paragraphs, it's basically one body paragraph.
Okay. Second question about speaking in general. What's the velocity when we give our response? Like how many words should we speak? Because one of the teachers, I will not mention his name, on the group, he speaks very fast.
Yes,
I will be honest with you. As a non-native speaker for English, I will never reach his level.
Absolutely.
Even maybe after 20 years, maybe, and maybe not. But I feel guilty and bad. Why? Because I feel that is the required level to order, like to get to 26 in speaking. I'm a pharmacist.
Well,
And like,
sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted. Please continue.
Oh, you're fine. Thank you.
No, sorry, to address the information. Yes, I will not name names. I think I know who you may be referring to. But that's exactly, and once again, no offense to anybody here, but that's exactly why I take the TOEFL exam. So my students ask me, Mike, is that test free, like ETS pays you? I'm like, no, I take $250 of my pocket to take that test. And the reason why I do it is because, guys, teaching the TOEFL exam it's a very huge responsibility. When I take a student, I understand that the person has a lot of expectations, and that person has a lot of goals that they would like to accomplish if they pass the TOEFL exam. And if I can help that happen, I feel very great. I don't like to take credit for my students pass the TOEFL exam because I'm not taking the test for them. But in order to teach effectively, and once again, no offense to anybody out there, but you have to face the TOEFL exam. You have to understand that some things look great on paper, but they may not look great in the heat of the moment in the real exam. So whenever I saw an advisory that basically said you have to speak faster. If you speak faster, you get more points. I said, but no, that makes no sense. Because once again, as I showed you before, if you start speaking quickly, the computer may not catch your words correctly. So if the computer misunderstands your message, you're not going to get the points you need. There isn't, I can promise you, I swear to you guys that when I deliver my answer in the speaking section, I'm speaking at this level. Like I'm not speaking any faster than this. I want the computer to understand every word I'm saying. I try to utter every word carefully. I can speak a whole lot faster than this. If you listen to me speaking to my friends, in my Florida lingo, it's different. It's way different than this. But in the real exam, I need to speak at a level like this because I always think to the back of my mind, if my students address the question at this level, what would they get? If I speak using a complex vocabulary, as a professor, of course I expect to get a good grade. But I promise you, my answers, just like you saw in the writing section and in the speaking section, are very generic. I give very simple words. In short, you don't have to speak quickly. It's not that you have to use 200 words to get full points. That's not the case. ETS has some rating systems that honestly look quite weird because they evaluate a bunch of things that I think to myself, this is irrelevant in the real exam. So sometimes ETS wants to over-evaluate you just to give you more metrics. See, I've seen people tell me, one time a tutor told me that I have to change my accent. Why? That's how you sound. Or I have to use more academic words. According to whom? Why? You have to address the question. So sometimes, unfortunately, and I honestly think that tutors mean the best. I mean, if you take a tutor that is a respectable tutor who has been teaching for a while, that person is doing the best they can. But oftentimes, they may focus on areas that are not really important. So I always tell my students, and I tell them, I'll take you with all your flaws, Limited vocabulary, not a problem. Issues with understanding things, that's fine. The idea is to learn together. So when you speak, don't worry much about how many words you're using or how fast you can speak. Worry about delivering the answer to that question. If you can do that effectively, trust me, you'll get the points you need. But if you focus on trying to speak in any different form than what you naturally do, trying to speak faster, use more complicated words, trust me, in the real exam, the second you hear the beep that goes off, when you may start speaking after the beep, trust me, your heart's going to come out of your chest, you start sweating, the anxiety kicks in. A lot of the strategies go out the window. So that's why you have to keep calm and just deliver the answer as best as you can. Don't worry about the number of words you're using. Don't worry about speaking quickly. That honestly should not be an issue.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, sir.
There we go. Mandeep, go ahead. I see your hand up. We're going to address the last three questions here, and then I'm going to give you a farewell, and I'm going to discuss a few more things. Go ahead, Mandeep.
Thank you so much. I just want to know, like, since we are done with the essay part, now in the academic discussion, we have an opportunity to score better in the writing section. This is what I feel. So can you just give me 3 tips so that I can gauge a better score in writing section?
Well, besides the ones that I've mentioned over the past 40 minutes, let me give you again. For the integrated writing section, as I mentioned before, address the question the way the question is being asked. Let's start from this. Use the examples that I'm going to provide you to see the patterns to address the lecture first. Make sure to keep an eye on the time. Of course, practice your typing speed. Many students type like this. Try to start practicing with more fingers. There are soft skills you can practice. For example, typing is a soft skill. Improve your typing speed. That's a very important skill that most people don't address. And for the academic discussion question, once again, make sure that you're fully addressing the question. There are so many questions that I saw there that have small elements of the question that students are not addressing. The question that we did here, for example, it wasn't about just making electric cars. It was about making electric cars to reduce the pollution produced by gas cars. So make sure you give me the full frame. Yes, it's annoying to write all of that, but if you don't write all of that, the computer can assume that you're not covering the full question. So give me the full answers. You improve your typing speed and address the questions the way they're meant to be addressed.
Okay. And can we give personal examples as well in this?
Sorry?
Can we give personal examples?
Oh yeah,
in
the personal examples are always available. Here's the thing, you can always give them. You don't have to, but you can. Sometimes students feel that they have to give a personal example. The question never says that. If you want to use one, you can do it, but don't feel obligated to give one.
Okay, okay. And anything about, like you mentioned that don't repeat, professor, I follow that. But anything about like we need to use transition words in the case of integrated and academic discussion, or like a high-end vocabulary will help you?
No, the idea of transition words for the integrated section, you need to transition every paragraph. So when you go between the lecture and the reading, you need to have a transition word. But typically the ones that I use are simple. However, in contrast, on the other hand, whereas, nevertheless, that's basically it. For the academic discussion, you just want to make sure that you illustrate when you're giving me the illustration. So simple term, for instance, or for example, that's basically it.
Right. One last question. Do you think that the amount of writing in the integrated should in the lecture should be 2:1, like more from the lecture and less from the reading?
Doesn't matter. As long normally, naturally speaking, you would have more content for the lecture, but it's not that you have to. In fact, that gives me a good answer. It's not that you have to write a lot of content for the lecture and then just tell me, and the lecture and the reading disagrees. That's not enough. Okay, you want to tell me what is the reading's opinion, but there isn't like a formula of do 3 times a year and then one fourth. That's not how it works. So sometimes they're going to be the same length. Sometimes the lecture may be smaller than the reading. Most of the time, the lecture will be longer.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks so much.
Fatem, go ahead.
Okay, I have a question regarding the reading section. How they grade the reading? Before it was 30 questions. Each question has, I believe, 1, except for the last one has 2. But right now, like, you know, all the time I get in reading a high score. But I did the exam on July 26th when they changed it. I got surprised when I saw 2 readings instead of 3. So and then my grade went down. I got 19. So you know, I don't know how they grade it. So can you tell me?
It's a simple grading system. For example, once again, if you have 20 questions, and let's say you get 17 questions out of 20, that means you got an 85%. So you divide 17 by 20, you get 85%. And then you take that 85 and multiply it times 30, and that gives you 25.5. So for example, that's how you that's a linear evaluation there. It's just a percentage. And the problem with having fewer reading sections, yes, is that now every mistake is a little bit more costly because now we have fewer questions. So every question is essentially more valuable. So if you make, for example, more than 5 mistakes, you're going to be below 22 points.
Right.
So that's why you got to be careful there.
Tomorrow is my exam, so wish me luck. Thank you.
Please, well, get some rest after this.
All right. Thank you.
Now, the Zoom user, let's finish up with this question, and then I'll give you guys some farewell information here. Go ahead, please. All right, while we figure out that microphone, let's address a few questions here in the chat. The question says, can I provide you guys with the website that you show us? Yes, everything will be posted in the report for the lesson. You're going to see that there. Once again, if you go to Facebook, let me send it again. Let me send you that information again, just to be certain. I'm going to send you here. Please make sure that if you're still watching here, because half of you left already, make sure to request access to these groups. This is the TOEFL IBT study group. I'm going to leave it in the chat. Make sure to pay attention to it, please. The TOEFL IBT study group, once again, that's a group where we have 200,000 members there. It's a large group. There, you can find me all the time. I'm always there. This is my other group, the TOEFL OMG TOEFL study group. This group is my group only. So I'm the only tutor there. All the content, all the tips, all the information that I give, it's me providing that information. And once again, if you need to reach out to me directly, you could always do so by clicking this link and sending me a message. One second here. Sending me a message here on Facebook. As I mentioned, guys, for those of you who need help preparing for the TOEFL exam, the worst thing that can happen is to be alone when you prepare for the TOEFL exam. Because if you have questions and you don't have an answer there, that's just going to start creating anxiety, insecurities, myth. You know, I heard this, I heard that. And that's when things get really, difficult. Make sure to, whenever that happens, get the help you need. Many of you may think, I don't want to get a tutor because I don't know the person, or maybe they're too expensive. And you're right. Sometimes getting help can be pricey. But so is taking the TOEFL exam multiple times. You'd be surprised how affordable sometimes teaching can be. There are many tutors out there, not the only one. If you need help, go to these groups and say, hey guys, I'm looking for a tutor. Here's my problem. Who could help me? Please do proper research. Don't just take the first person that comes to you. Ask questions. Ask them questions, expect answers. If you're comfortable with the questions, go ahead. If the person seems too good to be true, careful. Be careful out there with scammers. Unfortunately, in these groups, there's always someone there who's trying to take advantage of your, despair and insecurities. Whenever you hear people say, I can promise you to change your score directly, or I can give you the questions that are going to come up, or even people, because no one says, hi, I'm a scammer. Or these people who say, I passed the TOEFL exam after so many attempts, for more info, inbox, send me an inbox. That's a scammer, guys. If the person really wants to share that information, they'll do it openly. But if they always want to hide behind a message, that means they're going to tell you, I know this person is going to help you. Please get away from there. I've known students of mine who've been scammed, and they've confessed to me that they've paid people thousands of dollars to change their grades, and they just lost their money. Please be careful with that. If you need help, there's lots of professionals there that can help you. If you don't want a tutor, that's perfectly fine. Get a study group. Get a person, a group of people. You can leave a comment in the TOEFL IBT study group, for example, and say, I'm a pharmacist. I want to get a 26. I would like to make a group with just a few individuals there. Be specific. I want to meet 4 other pharmacists who can also want to get 26. Please, only pharmacists allowed. And once you get 4 people there, just delete the message. Okay? Now, Wait, based on you saying Jelly English, they are reliable or they're not reliable? I have some stories. I don't know if I want to share this out loud here. Okay, not reliable. Okay, me and you have the same stories then. You see, that's an example of one word can change the meaning. But once again, study groups within yourself is important. The reason why I'm creating a group study or a private study group is because some private lessons are great. I mean, they focus on you only, and that's honestly the best way to go about it. But when you have a group, it creates sort of the thing that you're missing most. All of you studied in a classroom. You're used to classroom studies. That's why the TOEFL exam is so weird, because it's not like what you've done before. So what I want to create in these individual groups that I'm putting together, once again, it's a module group. Each week will cover one particular area. The first week is going to be writing. The second week is going to be reading, then speaking, and then listening. If you only need help in one section, then you can access, once again, one of those weeks. You don't have to access all 4 of them. But this course that I'm putting together, it's great because it's going to create that unity of a group. Of course, I'll be teaching this lesson, so you're going to get 32 hours worth of training. Today we did 2 hours. Imagine 30 more, all the things that I can tell you that I didn't address today here. And you can choose which area of the TOEFL exam you want to work on. If you need all 4 of them, all 4 of them are available. If you only want to address the new writing section, hey, only the writing section could be fine. And most importantly, those lessons are recorded. So if you cannot be there live for the lesson, no worries. You can get access to the private group and get access to that information. So at this point, if you wish to be added to this group, if you want to get the information, please leave me, as I mentioned, name and email, and I will try to reach out to you. If not, I've already shared with you several times my link here. Once again, click on the link and simply put, send me a message. I see a couple of guys already getting together that are pharmacists. That's what you got to do. Once again, if you can get a few people there in a group, set up a schedule and work together. Don't do this alone. The TOEFL exam can be very overwhelming. There's a lot of pressure outside from family members, from coworkers, from the world at large. Get help. Either from friends, study groups, tutors, whoever. But get the help you need. Ideally, if I do this video again, if I do this video again a year from now, hopefully none of you have to watch this video again. I hope all of you guys pass the TOEFL exam. Thank you all for being here all this time. I took almost 3 hours of your time. I apologize for that. I didn't expect to make it that long. But once again, do your best, guys. Thank you all for listening. Hopefully today you learned something that maybe changed your perspective about the TOEFL exam. And hopefully you can use that in the exam and get the points you need. Once again, if you need to reach out to me, simply type my name, Miguel Marcano, on Facebook, and you should be able to find me. Guys, once again, hopefully, as I mentioned, a year from now, you don't have to deal with this anymore. That's my desire for all of you. I'll be here. I'll be teaching for as long as I need to, but hopefully you guys don't have to be here anymore. So best of luck in the upcoming test. Help those you can whenever possible. Help another fellow TOEFL tutor, another fellow TOEFL student. Sorry, I'm the tutor. Share content whenever possible that is useful, and keep on the community that we have. The TOEFL IBT study group is available. The OMG TOEFL study group is available. I'm available. Reach out whenever you need to. So, good night, everyone. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you around.